British government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this time is my time. Alright, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The flag. Flag is down. That is a good thing. I think a step in the right direction. One of the, in my view, one of the big symbols of racism, of hatred, gone from state property in South Carolina. I think a good thing, a good first step. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be an idiot and put it on, tattoo it to your forehead or wear a shirt, or doesn't mean any of that. Which means on state property, they're not going to do it. I think institutionally a good thing. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a little bit of liquor privatization. Going to have a really interesting conversation with State Senator John Eichelberger. I've invited him on the program. Evidently, he's someone's calling him and someone is expressing their displeasure with his policies. And he's not going to take it. So we're going to find out what those displeasures are. And my view on it, as what I've read, is this is what constituent services are about. You're dealing with people, and when you do things that are radical, you're going to get some reaction, and that's, to me, what this is. So we'll have that interesting conversation. Maybe even he'll even be willing to go into the radical agenda that the Republicans want to ram down the throats of Pennsylvanians. So we'll have that very interesting conversation. A whole bunch of other stuff on Monday. The big announcement by Scott Walker. We're going to take a look at what Scott Walker has accomplished there in the state of Wisconsin. Also, it's our Future Friday. Going to talk with our friend Isaiah Poole about a little bit about Greece, about the flag, but also some wonky stuff from D.C. that I think very, very important. Your thoughts, your questions, your comments, whatever's on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-7425, 1-888-520-RICK. I wasn't really going to talk about this because, the liquor privatization thing, right, we've been talking about for a while. I think my position on it's pretty clear. But I saw over at Penn Live, John Misick had a piece that, it's clickbaiting, I understand. It's one of those things, I wasted my time and I clicked on it and I read the story, and I like John. Whenever I ask him to come on the program, he does. Interesting kind of piece, though, if you're looking at it from a journalistic point of view. Now, right from the start, and I think he probably should have put this in there somewhere, that Penn Live will do a wonderful business once they privatize the wine and spirit shops. If they get away with it, this will be a boom for the advertisement community. That there'll be tons of ads, there'll be all that stuff, and in big much bigger numbers. So I think the monetary gain is important. But I read through his article, and he talks about going home to where he's from Connecticut, and how, it was this, how did he put it? It was something glorious that he walked into this beach, resort area liquor store. He walked in and there was beer and there was liquor because, at a beach, you kind of expect tourist trap. You kind of expect tourist liquor. It kind of all goes together. I mean, even when we go away for Christmas and we go down to the beach there in Florida, we go to the supermarket and we buy a little bit of alcohol. In fact, in the 2 weeks that I was there last year, I actually drank an entire 12-pack, which my producer, Sean, is like, I do that in a day. But, the thing is alcohol, beach, they mix. There's a handshake there. There's an expected kind of position. And the fact that, he would say that, I was going home to my beach community area, to this big family reunion, and I was going to bring booze and I walked into this store that had beer there, and it was everything. It was great. It was amazing. It was the first thing that popped into my head was, this is what you would expect in a tourist trap beach community. This is what you expect to be there. Is the whole point that Pennsylvania should be that every neighborhood, every town, every city is going to have that? Is that what we're to assume? And it doesn't really say. He said he was very thrilled to be able to go in there, and he talked a little bit about his experience, which, okay. You went to a beach town. There was a place that had booze because, the free market, if you will, would make sure that it's there. The question that I have for this is, do we want that in every single neighborhood? Because at some point, you're going to have two scenarios that are going to pop up. You're going to have competing stores that are going to race to the bottom because there's probably not going to be enough people coming often enough to keep them around. So you're going to have other problems. You look at Washington, D.C., for instance, where it's liquor and whatever. Liquor and dry cleaning, liquor and sandwiches, liquor and we'll pick your nose, liquor and we'll wash your toenails. There's always something, liquor and something else. And it's all there. Not a really great selection. They've got the Mad Dog 2020. They've got the Wild Irish Rose, that kind of stuff. Not the wide selection that he's saying that in the beach community you would fully expect to have. Because obviously enough, you're going to bring people with money to the beach. That's their vacation. They're going to look for things. It makes perfect sense there. I don't know about in my backyard it making any sense. And this is the part that, kind of confuses me with this position that he's taken, which is that, am I to believe that we're going to have this amazing, alcohol metropolis in every community in the state? And I don't think that's the case, Sean. I just don't. I find it interesting.
Yeah, and one of the things I have a bone to pick with his article and the way he's been doing it the past few days is, they've been blaming the union as the ones who have been stopping this. I worked in a beer distributor for the past 2 years. The beer distributor I worked at outside of Philadelphia was the largest beer distributor in the 5-county region when it came to selling volume. And my owner owned 3 other separate beer distributors just as big. And guess who his friends are? Tommy Tomlinson, Chuck McElhenney, and the other Bucks County Republicans who have been responsible for holding up liquor privatization. Why? Because he's going to lose out on his monopoly. And, there's other people involved with this. And the reason why beer prices are so high for takeout and other things is because you have to go to a bar to buy a 6-pack of beer. The people at the bar owners have their own little fiefdom. The people at the beer distributors have their own little fiefdom. But no one's really paying attention to them. The private, and that's one of my bones to pick with this, because there's other people who are working together to stop this.
Now, in his piece, he does address the fact that Pennsylvania has a weird kind of, and as someone who came from Ohio to move here, I thought it was a little weird. The state stores didn't, it made sense to me because that's how it was in Ohio. You had state stores in supermarkets. You had them in other places where if you wanted Jack Daniels, if you wanted, gin, you wanted, the hard stuff, there was a place to go for it. You knew where it was. Beer was much more liberally produced and put around. You could get beer in the gas station. You could drive through a beer distributor place and they'd hand you a single can of cold beer. But don't drink and drive. Don't do that.
And in his article, he mentioned that the beer has been privatized. I've never known that beer was a communist-owned institution in Pennsylvania. Was it?
Well, beer it's privatized, but it's privatized with a monopoly.
It's the whole entire free market.
Well,
or it's privately owned.
It's the rigged free market. So, but this is the thing, and this is where you talk to average everyday folks, and they'll say, "Yeah, I would like to pick up a 6-pack or wine coolers at the grocery store." I've yet to hear anybody tell me that, I got to get Jack. Get me some Jack next to the Tic Tacs. I've yet to hear anybody say liquor should be the wild, wild west. Beer, wine, yeah, I've heard arguments for, I'd like to pick it up a beer at the grocery store, which now, if with modernization, you can put wine in stores, beer, allow some of the loosening of that, which is going to screw those beer distributors.
No, because they're actually pushing for. They've been my boss has actually been pushing for modernization.
Because he has a distribution center, right? He's
He-
a distributor.
No, he owned the wholesale business for a while with
Right.
Yingling and Sam Adams were his big money makers, but he sold them off as he sold his wholesale
So
company.
how would he benefit from putting it into the supermarkets?
Because he is the largest by volume in those areas, and he has taken out other beer distributors.
Oh, okay.
So when he built his third beer distributor near us, he basically bought the licenses of 2 other beer distributors, and bought them out. But so he has his own little fiefdom in those areas.
So he has a monopoly.
He's the only game in town.
So he's got a monopoly.
Yeah, and he has. And what else is happening? He has an open office space or a retail space in his new Taj Mahal of beer, is what it looks like. And he's actually trying to lobby the state to get a wine and spirits store in the same parking lot, the same building as his is in. So he's actually, going for the one-stop shopping. But when I talk to my parents on this issue, even my mom's the same way. She's like, no, liquor should be in the state stores. You're not, because she's like, listen, I know how this stuff happens. I used to work in a beer distributor as a cashier, and you get kids coming in all the time trying to buy stuff. Estate store, they're a lot more diligent with that. And she's like, I get my beer all the time at the Wegmans or at the Giant in the area.
And here's the thing, and this is where I'm going to leave this before we move on. The reality is I grew up in that environment where at 15, I was actually going to bars at 15, and it was actually able to buy the crowd pleaser 30-pack of Jobel in numerous places. I mean, it wasn't just one. I mean, there were within walking distance of where we lived, there were probably 10 places that you could go consistently to be able to buy whatever alcohol you wanted. And that I don't want for my kids. I don't want for society, because I think back to those days, and this is where you start thinking about those mistakes you made as a dumb kid. And the number, I think of Jim Fralick, the kid that I graduated the year before me, who got drunk and decided he was going to ride on the bumper of a car until he flipped off, hit his head on a curb, and died the night he graduated. Shouldn't have been drinking alcohol. Shouldn't have had it. But where did he get it? These easily available stores. And when I was a kid, they were all over the place. Now you could say things are tougher now, things have changed. Nonsense. There's always going to be that availability if you loosen these ranges. That's just my thought on it, especially when you start talking about liquor. I mean, my first experience was with liquor. I drank an entire bottle of Canadian Windsor in like 8 glasses. And there's a whole story that goes along with that I would prefer not to share. But it's being young and being kind of dumb and not, it's a dangerous combination. And I think by liberalizing this and turning it into the wild, wild west of liquor here in the state is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
On so many levels. And that's beyond the economic part of it.
No, I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break. Talk a little bit more, maybe a little bit on the other side. Let's stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1902. A powerful gas and dust explosion occurred in the Rolling Mill Mine in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown was rich in coal resources. The coal industry in Cambria County gradually grew thanks to the rise of the industry in the region. The first large-scale mining in Cambria County occurred in 1856, when the newly formed Cambria Iron Company opened the Rolling Mill Mine. Most of the miners who were killed were recent immigrants from Central and Eastern Europe. 110 miners were killed in the explosion. The explosion was caused by fire damp, a term used by miners to mean a mixture of methane gas. Miners working in one section of the mine were killed immediately, while many other miners were killed by afterdamp, an asphyxiating gas that spread through the mine as the miners tried to flee to the only other exit from the mine. The mine reopened on July 14th. However, the disaster devastated the immigrant community in Johnstown and prompted calls for investigations and greater mine safety measures. The rolling mill mine continued to operate until 1931. In the mine's latter years, it was part of the Bethlehem Mines Corporation. The rolling mill mine disaster still ranks as one of the deadliest mining accidents in the history of mining in this country. There are still mine disasters to this day. In March of 2015, there was a deadly mine collapse at the Murray Energy coal mine in Marshall County, West Virginia. Thus, we remember that all workers deserve to work in a safe environment.
Come on, you young fellas, so brave and so fine.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Way down into mine, it'll foam like a habit.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. On Fox and Friends, Fox News contributor and medical A-team member Keith Abloh discussed a surveillance video showing then Florida State University quarterback DeAndre Johnson punching a female student in the face at a bar. Abloh went on to blame co-ed sports and a culture that tries to, quote, dispense with the idea of gender differences. Here's Fox and Friends host Steve Ducey.
We all know a man should never hit a woman, right?
Well, that's what I was raised with, Steve, and I still go with that philosophy. But you know what? That may be an antiquated notion if you look at our culture, which has just in a wholesale way dispensed with all gender quote-unquote stereotypes. Listen, if you're saying that that it's just fine to flip a girl onto her back in a wrestling match and pin her to the ground and take some joy in that, well, then I guess if you're in a bar and she slaps you, you punch her in the face. Not in Abloh's world, because you'd never be wrestling her to begin with.
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
All the things you want are real. You have you to complete, and there is no deal.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. So the big day today, the flag is down, but could there have been a better way to do this? Did it have to be the all the press releases, all the press conferences, all the chest thumping, all of that? Did it have to be this kind of public display? I don't know. That's why we're going to ask our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson, what his thoughts on the flag issue, where they come down on. Erwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here, Rick. How are you?
I'm good. So, good thing, bad thing, this democracy in action. What are your thoughts?
Political sideshow extraordinaire is what my thought is. We all need to remember something. That flag, that offensive piece of trash, was the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia, the flag of an armed insurrection against the democratically elected government of the United States of America. And no less than Robert E. Lee, at the moment of his surrender at Appomattox, urged and directed his supporters to furl that flag and hide it away. But somehow or another, the sovereign state of South Carolina, along with others, purported to adopt a law to enshrine that memorial of a battle and armed insurrection against our government to fly above its official public buildings. And Nikki Haley, cynically, I believe, in her capacity as governor of South Carolina, used the horrid deaths, murders of 9 wonderful souls who were in their church as a political platform, not to take the flag down, but to create a series of photo ops, press conferences, chest thumping, and media circus to wait until the Florida state legislature repealed a law that advocated displaying the symbol of an armed insurrection against our country, to take it down and to act as if she is something other than what we all know she is.
A political opportunist.
A rank political opportunist who saw this as the opening salvo in her campaign to be vice president of the United States of America.
Really, you think that's kind of playing into this, you think?
I really do think so. I think it's about as subtle as a brick flying through a window. But what is so offensive about this is she's the chief executive of South Carolina.
Right.
She could have very easily, in the face of those 9 murders, or maybe even on the day she was sworn in the first time, or the day she was sworn in the second time as governess, maybe, I don't know, taken the flag down. What would have been the worst that would have happened? Would somebody have sued her?
Potentially.
And if they did, would it be appropriate to expend the funds of the taxpayers to protect the right of the Constitution of the United States, the supreme organic law of our land, that was in the face of what was behind that rebel flag, capital R rebel, as in rebellion, that memorialized that and commemorated that and honored that in the face of our own United States Constitution, which was amended not once, not twice, but 3 times because of that armed insurrection. That's the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. The Equal Protection Amendments, okay, the Voting Rights Amendments, the Anti-Discrimination Equality Amendments. So if somebody would have sued her, I would like to have met and had the opportunity to think about, speak about, and write about the kind of person that would have instituted a lawsuit against her had she just taken the flag down. And oh, by the way, we need to be cognizant of something else again. The state legislature of the state of South Carolina couldn't just quietly undo or repeal their law. They had to have days of debate and crocodile tears from an ancestor of the President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, and go through a series of legislative political wranglings with amendments aimed at stopping it, and still getting 20 votes against taking down the memorial of the armed insurrection against the government of the United States. And I know I keep on saying that, but it needs to sink in.
Oh, it is. And a lot of people that I've seen have called that flag the American swastika, thinking it's the same kind of treasonous flag that it is.
Well, it's the flag of treason. And understand, it was not the flag of the Confederate States of America, even. However long or short one chooses to believe that entity existed. This was the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia. Okay? This was the battle flag of Lee's army. And it was the symbol of the battle, the armed fight against our democracy, against the government that was legitimately elected. This was the only time in our history, in the history of this country, going back to 1776, going back to the Constitution of 1789 after the Articles of Confederation, where people took up arms to overthrow the elected government. in every other instance, the transition of power has been peaceful. It's been the hallmark of the United States.
Yep, that's one of the reasons that John Adams is one of my my favorite founding fathers and favorite presidents.
Yes, as mine, as we talked about in the context of President's Day a few weeks back.
So let me ask you this. I mean, because, you know, I remember going through high school and learning about American history, and we did a little bit of the Civil War, and yeah, a lot of this stuff is just hurry up, gloss over stuff. How much of this is the fact that our educational system really hasn't gone into this stuff? Because I remember learning about this, and nobody really wanted to. You know, we got facts, we got dates, we got this, we got battles, and the battles were always glorified, and, you know, there was valor and all that, which there was. But to me, the whole the whole Civil War was a failure of diplomacy, and really I would think a failure of our Constitution from the start.
Well, it was a failure of the Constitution that the Civil War amendments attempted to correct.
Right.
It was certainly that, but we need to go back to ninth grade civics class. And I've spoken of this in a different context in the past when I've been honored to be on your show. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution of the United States, speak about and address our rights as citizens between us and our government, our federal government only. And because the 10th Amendment says specifically all rights not specifically delegated to the government of the United States are reserved to the states and the people, the real battle underlying the Civil War was a battle, yes, over slavery, indeed, and how heinous that was, but it was also a battle over what the respective rights, duties, and relationships were as between the several states and the federal government. And all these years later, these literally 150 years later, we are having that same battle again about whether the states or the federal government are supreme. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and particularly the 14th Amendment, stand for the proposition, and the 14th, with great specificity, stands for the proposition that all rights we citizens have as between us and our federal government, we also have as between us and our individual states, and political subdivisions created by those states.
Right.
So this was very significant, and indeed, when we leave ninth grade civics class, we don't really understand that I don't have a free speech right as against you. I don't have a right to free exercise of religion as against you. I don't have a right to bear arms against you. I don't have a right to free assembly with respect to you. I have it with respect to my government.
Right. And with this flag issue, this is one of those conversations that I've had. This is, you know, the state government saying the flag's not going to fly on state grounds. You can tattoo it to your forehead or wrap yourself into it. Bless you, do what you got to do. But this is between the government.
Yeah, and that's why I have my view of what Nikki Haley has been doing these last several weeks in the face of these horrible racist murders that I had deluded myself into believing this country had long since passed, and it hasn't. But the rank political opportunism of the people who are running the state of South Carolina and the failure of traditional media to call them out on this is mind-boggling to me, because nothing stopped her in her capacity as chief executive from the moment she took office and before, from advocating and acting on taking down that symbol of treason against our government. And there is no constitutionally protected right for the state to speak out against our federal government. I have a right to speak out against our government. I can advocate orally armed insurrection against my government. That is not standing alone treason, unless and until I act on it. Then that is treason.
Okay, so Donald sent me an email here while we've been talking, and he sends me a bit of the Declaration of Independence. which he said these people, these patriots is the word he uses. They were just doing what the Declaration of Independence says, that governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and he has highlighted abolish it. His claim is that these patriots of the Confederacy, these are the folks who were just doing what Thomas Jefferson ordered them to do.
Well, there are 4 or 5 problems with that. Number one, the Declaration of Independence is just that, it's a declaration, it's not the law. The Constitution, on the other hand, is the law. Number 2, because of our Constitution and the statutory framework developed under it, we have in this country uniquely peaceful means by which to take care of that very problem. We unelect the people who shouldn't be elected. Now, we have people really interfering with that aspect of our democracy. Their initials are the Supreme Court of the United States, and their action is in a case called Citizens United that allows people to buy more speech than others of us have and manipulate the electoral process. But in its purest form, the reason our Constitution guarantees free exercise and free assembly and free speech is so that we can have our insurrection not be armed. Number 3, that battle was fought, and the democratically elected government of the United States of America didn't lose, it won. The rebellion was put down. That was the end of it, and that's precisely why General Lee was first among men in asking that this flag be furled. Number 4, and really of great importance, maybe the greatest importance, because it's bound up in morality, not in law. That flag is a symbol of provocation that iterates and reiterates a belief at the highest levels of the government of the state of South Carolina until this morning, that South Carolina, as a matter of public policy, enshrines the notion, 2 notions. One, that people of color are not equal to people who are white. And 2, that the people of the sovereign state of South Carolina are above federal law, even when it comes to an armed insurrection against the democratically elected government of the United States of America, consistent with the people's Constitution. I have said many times, and you have unfortunately heard me say, that our Constitution is unique because it's a grant of rights from the people to the government, not a grant of rights from the government to the people. So while I appreciate our listeners' email, he simply gets it wrong. This is not what Thomas Jefferson urged. And by the way, as a true small d Democrat, Thomas Jefferson never commanded anybody to do anything. He traded in a world of ideas, not in a world of directions and armed insurrections.
Well, and the other part of this, we always hear the conservatives, bring out this, sometimes the blood of patriots has to be spilled on the tree of liberty, and there's this kind of rhetoric that I think that flies around this as well.
Well, there's no question that this is all, and what Nikki Haley has done these last several weeks, very clearly a rhetorical flourish. I'm one of that group of people that believes in action and in deeds, not in flourishes of rhetoric. There's this wonderful quote somebody shared with me earlier this week attributed to former Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, in which Gandhi said that there are 2 kinds of people in the world, those who act and those who take credit for acting. And I urge you to try to become a member of the former, because the latter is a rather overcrowded group.
Yeah. So let me ask you a last line of questioning then, because the flag is down, regardless of how it got here. This is a good thing, right?
Oh, I think it's absolutely a good thing. It's a great thing. And it is, again, another symbol of our progress of a society. It breaks my heart and it shocks my conscience that 9 wonderful souls had to be murdered to trigger Nikki Haley and company into action. But the result is wonderful. The result is fine. The result is a mark of progress for us as a nation. I just wish it had not happened in so cynical and rankly political a fashion.
Yeah.
And that instead, like a true executive, she had just taken it down. And if prior to the day of that murder, that Wednesday murder in a church where people had every right to seek and believe they had successfully secured sanctuary, if she couldn't bring herself to take it down till then, at the moment that that happened, as we put the flags at half-staff in memory of those wonderful souls, one of whom was a state senator as well as a minister, she could have taken it down then. She chose not to, and wraps herself in yet another flag and suggests that she didn't do so because this is a government of laws, not of people. And that's just unmitigated hogwash.
I'm with you, Erwin. As always, great to have you on the program. Great to hear your insight, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate getting the chance to pop off a little. So thank you, and thank our listener who took the time to write in and give us his views, because that's more important than anything else.
There you go. Thanks so much, Erwin.
Thank you. Take care.
Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You remember when you're climbing to the top, you'd better know the way back down. I can't believe you'd really stumble, and I always knew you'd fall. It seems so easy to say I knew you when I'd rather it was not at all.
This 18.7 billion is just a drop in the bucket.
While we were out, record settlement in BP's oil disaster in the Gulf.
I believe the way to go in coal is to get the technology that can address the issues rather than to put coal out of business.
Former Senator Jim Webb enters the 2016 race. We'll tell you his terrible position on climate change. Extreme heat waves shatter records on 4 continents. Plus,
history was made today as the Solar Impulse 2 touchdown at Kalailo Airport.
Solar-powered plane flies into aviation history.
All of that history and more, ironically, in your very near future. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The Supreme Court tossing out the Environmental Protection Agency's first ever rules requiring power plants to cut emissions of mercury and other air pollutants.
This was a big victory for private industry. This is a rare win for the coal industry. It's a victory for business.
You seem really giddy about that victory. You know the losing team in that game was Lungs. You know that, right?
Yes, I do. This is your Green News Report.
Lungs, business rules.
Okay, Desi Doyen, after well over a dozen candidates getting into this 2016 race on both the Republican and the Democratic side, we finally have a full-on, all-out denier on the Democratic side entering the race.
Yeah, in politics, former Senator Jim Webb of Virginia has now become the 5th candidate to jump into the race for the 2016 Democratic presidential nomination. Now, we've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the official 2016 candidates, and while former Senator Webb doesn't outright deny climate change,
yes, he does.
He really doesn't want to do anything about it. In the Senate, he voted for expanding oil and gas drilling and stopping the Environmental Protection Agency from even regulating emissions. Here he is in 2011.
I am not convinced that the Clean Air Act was ever intended to regulate or to classify as a dangerous pollutant something as basic and ubiquitous in our atmosphere as carbon dioxide.
So he doesn't want to do anything about carbon dioxide. He's a believer in, quote, clean coal technology. He fought against the Obama administration when they put a moratorium on offshore drilling during the BP oil spill disaster in the Gulf. And as if all of that is not bad enough,
I'm a strong believer from the time that I was 18 years old in the advantages of nuclear power.
This guy, it's shocking he has a D by his name. And did I say that his position on climate is terrible?
Yes, I believe you did.
All right.
Speaking of the BP oil disaster in the Gulf, it has been a long 5 years since that rig exploded and killed 11 workers, then dumped 200 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Oil giant BP has now agreed to pay $18.7 billion, the largest environmental settlement in the nation's history, to compensate the federal government and 5 Gulf states for environmental and economic damages. But as journalist Antonia Juhas told Nicole Sandler on the broadcast earlier this week, BP is getting off easy.
The amount of the settlement doesn't meet BP's legal obligations. It doesn't meet the cost necessary to restore the Gulf, which BP is required to do under the Oil Pollution Act. And it certainly doesn't dissuade other actors from behaving in the same type of grossly negligent behavior, which a federal judge said that BP did.
Remember, no prosecutions have occurred of BP executives, and if this settlement is approved by the court, BP gets to spread those payments over 18 years.
Oh, it's nice to be a corporation.
Meanwhile, extreme persistent heat waves are shattering records across 4 continents. In the U.S., an extreme heat wave in Washington state broke all-time state temperature records. Weather Underground's Dr. Jeff Masters says what's surprising is not just the number of locations breaking all these records, but by how much the records are being broken. 4 to 5 degrees or more over the previous records. In Europe, the UK recorded its hottest July temperature ever, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. 3 other nations also broke their all-time national heat records: the Netherlands, Thailand, and Colombia. But Germany beat them all, breaking its all-time record for hottest temperature ever recorded in the entire country on Sunday at 104 degrees.
You know what we need? Some more clean coal. Am I right, Jim Webb?
And finally,
in a plane without a drop of fuel. 5 days, 5 nights. A flight that many thought would not be possible.
the 100% solar-powered plane, the Solar Impulse 2, landed safely in Hawaii after completing a record-breaking and dangerous non-stop flight across the Pacific Ocean. The 5-day, 5-night non-stop flight broke 2 records: longest plane flight powered only by the sun, and the longest non-stop solo flight in world history. It now heads to Phoenix on its historic trip around the world to bring attention to the promise of clean energy.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Minimum wage.
You know what it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Website, ricksmithshow.com. Interesting little story coming out of my former hometown there, Cleveland, Ohio. Evidently, they're the host city for the Republican National Convention. They're the host. They won it. I think like $50 million. They had to chuck into it to make sure that they won. Yay, we won. With that kind of winning, I don't think that I would have to pay $50 million. Don't know that I'm really all that interested, but they did. They won. So good for them. What I found very interesting, this little story, again, kind of in line with, in the insanity that is the Republican Party. They are offering fellowships. It's no longer, it's no longer jobs. We're going to offer you fellowships. So you can you were a fellow on your resume. Volunteer coordinator fellow. It's basically a full-time job, during the time that the convention's going on, from now until the convention. And when the convention week happens, it's going to be considerably more hours, because this is going to be tough. Extended hours, as they point out, in the run-up to the convention, which will be next summer. And for, this fellowship, they will pay you $1,000 a month. Now, you sit down, you kind of do the math of working, extended hours, minimum wage, all that stuff. About almost $6 an hour. Now, the federal minimum wage, $7.25, right? That's the federal minimum wage. The state minimum wage for Ohio is $8.10 an hour. So this is one of those kind of Republican. Here's the reality. They want a whole bunch of people to do free work, and this kind of takes me back to the little George or Jeb Bush statement that what we need are people that work more hours. You need to be more productive. You need to work harder. You need to work more hours, and you need to do it for less wages. And I just find it interesting that you've got the RNC, who should be saying, we're going to be the people who show the free market can work, and we're going to hire good quality people. We're going to pay them reasonable wages. No, not doing that. We're going to continue to abuse the internship idea. We're going to continue to abuse the quote unquote fellowship idea so we can get a whole bunch of free labor. And that really is the Republican way.
Yes, it is. No, I mean,
and this is the party of low wages. I mean, and this really highlights that party of low wage story in that frame.
Yeah, and one of the things I would love that people make, if you're working more hours, right? We're working 47, 50 hours a week. There's going to be less jobs available for people, so the unemployment rate's going to remain high. If you actually have people working 40 hours a week and that's it, you're going to hire more people, and more people are going to be back in the workforce.
And then and this again, and the
You're creating
Republicans
jobs.
understand this. The Republicans do understand it because their economists get it too. That if you do this and you tighten the labor pool, which is why they want people working 50, 60 hours a week. They want people just slaving away so that, one, they can't think of anything else other than, oh my gosh, I'm tired. I still can't keep a roof over my kid's head. But they want you slaving away so that you're not paying attention to what they're doing. And I would argue that lowering the number of hours people work and still be able to support a family would help bring more people into the workforce, which would do what? It would tighten the labor pool and naturally cause an increase in wages. We saw that back during the Clinton years where like I've said before, the McDonald's down the street from me back in the mid 90s was paying $10 an hour. As soon as they passed that welfare reform bill that the Republicans wanted and Clinton went along with, the bottom fell out, and you saw the bottom of the labor of the wage structure fall. And everyone at the bottom fell, and everyone along the whole thing came with them, which is why you see some of a good portion of the stagnation and the decline in wages. It's pretty simple. I mean, don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure it out.
No, and another thing about this is the free internship part. I was lucky to have an internship with a union in Harrisburg, and I was getting paid $10 an hour for 35-hour weeks. And a lot of my friends in college were taking free internships. One of my friends who was his environmental science major with said, no, I will never take a free internship for someone, especially when I got to pay for that credit. When you're taking that internship, you still got to pay the $1,000, $1,500 for that credit that they're going to give you. And he, a big argument blew up in his thing. So, well, you should be thankful you have the internship. And he's like, what? So I could slave myself. And basically like this argument, like, no, you should not. If you're going to be doing that type of work, you should be getting paid for it.
I'm with you. I think your time is valuable. You should be paid for it. If you're trading hours of your life for the ability to live, you should be compensated for it. Now, the job has been pulled, so no job, no fellowship, because the president and CEO of the host committee, a guy named David Gilbert, evidently didn't know. And in a statement that they released, said we did post the position before consulting with legal counsel, something we realized we should have done. While the position was meant to be a fellowship, after checking with our legal counsel for further discussion, the decision was made to repost the position as a full-time staff function with compensation that reflects the job's description. So they were trying to sneak one by.
And what does this say about how they're trying to treat the younger generation coming up into their party? Because I bet you the people taking those staffing positions aren't going to be in their 40s or 50s.
You should just be honored. It's that simple. You should be honored to have the fellowship.
And then may the wealth rain upon you later on.
There you go. All right. Well, yeah, there you go. There's a job opening, I guess. a screw job. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
You fight on to the end. Together we will live on forevermore. In this land we have defended from all things dark and cruel. Now we are defenseless.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
When the Supreme Court ruled that states can no longer ban same-sex marriage, it set off a cacophony of howling hyperbole by the GOP's 14 presidential wannabes. "I will not acquiesce to an imperial court," blustered Mike Huckabee. "Resist and reject judicial tyranny," he bellowed. Huck even couched his cry for continued discrimination against gay people by likening it to Abe Lincoln's principled refusal to honor the court's 1857 ruling that African Americans could not be citizens. Sure, Mike, you're a modern-day Lincoln, except that he was opposing discrimination while you're demanding that government enforce it. Then came the wild hair of the GOP's presidential menagerie, Donnie Trump, blathering that the gay marriage decision is Jeb Bush's fault. Really? The Donald explained that Jeb's brother George had appointed Chief Justice John Roberts to the court, so there you have it. Shh. Let's not spoil Trump's hallucination by telling him that Roberts actually voted against letting gays marry. Now, on to Scott Walker, who's touted as the serious contender. Yet, he's seriously pushing a constitutional amendment to let government keep prohibiting same-sex marriages. No one wants to live in a country where the government coerces people to act in opposition to their conscience, said Scott, apparently oblivious to the fact that state governments have long been coercing LGBT people to do exactly that. And now Walker is promising, if elected, to coerce them right back into a life of unconscionable injustice. This is Jim Hightower saying every one of the 14 Republican presidential candidates is marching backwards into the bigoted past, piously thumbing their noses not only at millions of gays and lesbians, but also at the ever-growing majority of Americans, especially young people, who support marriage equality.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Rebels away, though heavy your heart shall always be. No ball or chain, no prison shall keep where the rebels of the sacred heart. I said no ball or chain, no prison shall keep where the rebels of the sacred heart.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So, some good news out of the National Labor Relations Board. You may remember us talking about this agreement that the Postal Service was trying to rig up with Staples, that they would be closing down local post offices, and they would be moving those postal services into the local Staples stores. I remember saying, and I'll say it again, horrible idea, dumb idea, bad idea, ridiculous idea. Well, evidently the NLRB said, yeah, this is a violation of the subcontracting language of the contract. Can't do it. I'm assuming the Postal Service is not going to stop. They're going to continue to try, but this is why you go through the whole legal process, why you have a contract. Now, real quick on this. Think about it for a second. Staples has closed hundreds of stores across the country. I mean, you're talking about the stability of how the mail in this country gets moved around. Do you really think it's a good idea? And I know there are people who are the privatization nuts, that they've got this fetish that everything needs to be in the hands of the profiteers because, that's the only way it gets done. Yet mail comes to my house every day. This whole privatization fetish is dangerous, especially when you're talking about those kind of services, those kind of national services that are needed. And to me, the concern is when they go belly up, what does it cost us to restart those things? So you close down all these post offices that are the center of a lot of the communities that this is going to happen to. What happens when they go, well, we can't make money here anymore. We're going to have to go. We're going to have to go out of business, or you can give us a boatload of cash, which is, in my opinion, that's the scheme. As soon as they get, as soon as the profiteers get us dependent on them, then it's, oh, you want it? You're going to have to pay for it. And you're going to have to pay big for it. And that's the sad reality of this whole fetish. They know that once they get us hooked, there's no going back. I mean, the trash is a perfect example. You look across this country, communities privatized their trash services because they didn't want to raise taxes. So what they do, they raise taxes and they just called it something else. So the $200 a year in taxes I pay to one of the trash companies to come pick up my one bag of trash a week that I can't do anything else with because the law has said I can't. That's the wonder of the free market. And I'm telling you, they get their foot in the post office door. It's going to be the same thing. Bad, bad, bad. So good news out of the NLRB. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast there at thericksmithshow.com. Get the app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go. And as always, you can email me here, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Millions of American workers will become newly eligible for overtime pay under a new Obama administration rule being considered by the Labor Department. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka is urging public support for that proposed overtime pay rules change.
Millions of American workers are closer to earning overtime pay than they have been in a long time. When they get overtime pay, they increase not only their standard of living, but they help the economy. We asked President Obama to go bold, and he did. And now it's our turn to support that proposal. Here's all you have to do. Go on your computer, type in www.aflcio.org/overtime. Put your information in, click on submit, and you're done. 20 seconds. Just think of it. 20 seconds, you can help 11 million people get a raise.
Teamsters Local 357 is suing Republic Airways, alleging the airline broke the law by unilaterally changing pilots' working conditions without an agreement from the union. More than 2,200 Republic pilots are members of that local, and they've been trying to win a fair contract since 2007. Jim Clark, president of Teamsters Local 357, says Republic has had 8 years to come to an agreement. The pilots are seeking a fair contract that spells out pay, benefits, and working conditions so that the company can't give something and take it back at their whim. That's what these hardworking, skilled pilots deserve now, he says, plain and simple. Is Jeb Bush's "people need to work longer hours" comment his version of the infamous Mitt Romney 47% remark? Brad Woodhouse of Americans United for Change.
The suggestion that we don't need to do anything to help people get better wages or get in the middle class. We just need you folks to work harder. It's disgusting. It's inappropriate. It shows how out of touch he is. It is the quintessential 47% comment of this campaign so far.
Linda Tirado is a former low-wage worker and author of Hand to Mouth, Living in Bootstrap America. She says American workers are already working harder than workers in any other industrial democracy.
and to say, we just need you to put in another 10 hours. Well, honey, where are they going to come from? You point me to the good job store. You point me to the overtime. We will do it willingly. But don't tell me I have to go out and create that opportunity for myself, and that it's a one-way discussion, and that it's entirely on the workers of America to get this done. I think that there are solutions outside of just telling the American people that they're not working hard enough.
WIN is made possible in part through underwriting support from OPEIU and from the National Association of Letter Carriers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Well, we're going to start in a couple weeks with our budget adjustment bill. The first step is we're going to deal with collective bargaining for all public employee unions, because you divide and conquer.
Divide and conquer to go after those teachers and those public servants, the people who plow the roads, the people who keep the water safe to drink. All those public servants, they don't need pensions or rights or pay. They do it because they love it, and they should do it because, like the RNC wants to do in Cleveland. Give you a stipend, a little fellowship money, and a nice title. That seems to be where the Republicans want to take us. And on Monday, the guy you heard there in the Mr. Divide and Conquer, he's going to announce his run or his entering the 2016 presidential race, joining the others on the clown car. And I found it interesting that today in the little damage control, he was on a local radio program there in Madison saying that the changes to the open records law was kind of a mistake. And it wasn't me, honestly, wasn't us. We would never do that. Trust us. Which is just really bizarre to me. But here to talk a little bit about the good governor there in Wisconsin, I've asked Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action of Wisconsin, to come talk with us. Robert, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Good to be with you, Rick.
So it wasn't him. He didn't do it. He didn't want to change the open records law. He wants to be Mr. Transparency.
Right. So the budget just got at the 11th hour, literally at midnight, a provision that would shield a lot of his internal communications and plans as governor from the national media, from his opponents in the race for president. It just happened to get there. It had nothing to do with Governor Walker. So, I mean, it's amazing when he gets caught on something, he had nothing to do with it. Same thing when he tried to change the whole mission statement of the university and say it wasn't about advancing knowledge or connecting knowledge to the state. So it's the same old. He tried to sneak it in and he got caught.
And this time, I think, he's getting complaints from both sides. I mean, because conservatives are just as outraged, I think, as you would consider liberals or anyone else, because, I think they realize it could be at some point, Walker's not going to be governor forever. It could be someone else doing something that they don't want done.
Well, traditionally, we have very strong open records laws in Wisconsin. They go back to the progressive era. And conservatives have used them not only against Democratic governors, but against the current progressive Democrats who are in the minority. And so the conservative groups use the open records laws all the time. And then, of course, the fourth estate, the media jumped in a big way where they've been passive on a lot of issues with Walker because basically it's the source of most of their stories that they do on Walker is the open records laws.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was the media, it was both progressive advocates advocating for free speech and open government, but then even the conservative advocates for it as well.
The reason I think him jumping into the race on Monday, or he claims he's going to jump in on Monday, we're expecting that's what we've been told. I think
it's a big planned event in Waukesha at the Expo Center. Yeah, so he's definitely doing it. It's going to be a big show.
So we're expecting this. It's going to happen. So I think it's a good time to talk about, really the kind of the president he would be. What kind of a leader would he bring to the nation? And I look at Wisconsin. I look at your neighbor there in Minnesota, and it really is the tale of two different ideologies. And I got to be honest, I don't like the one coming out of Wisconsin.
You're absolutely right. Minnesota has a much fairer tax system. Much better economic growth that's more evenly distributed because they actually have standards around wages, and they have much lower healthcare costs. We do a report at our organization, Sanitation Wisconsin, every year on this, and they're 30% lower because they're using all the tools of the healthcare reform law, and Walker's trying to sabotage it every turn. And so it's a starkly different record about what happens with two very similar states demographically, with right-wing conservative leadership versus progressive leadership.
But, given his record, given what he's done there, which has all been destruction, I mean, the credit I guess you can give him, if you have to, is that he did destroy the living conditions and the wages and hours of public sector workers, and he turned Wisconsin into a right to work state, which will ensure lower wages and worse working conditions for workers. I don't know that that's something that I would at least hope that's not something that working people in this country really want to see happen nationwide.
Well, working people definitely shouldn't. It might be a very successful strategy in Republican primaries. That's why there are a lot of people, despite the Donald Trump kind of boomlet going on, who think it is between Bush and Walker and Rubio. And his playbook has been to play the ALEC, the far right, the Koch brothers, do the most extreme conservative thing that's in their playbook possible, and defend it and stand behind it and push it no matter what. Use all the power of government to do it. And that's very appealing. It kind of falls into their idea of this quasi-authoritarian leader who's going to do what's right and tell all of their enemies a thing or two and make them pay. And it's the big things you talked about, like collective bargaining. It's also a lot of small things, like drug testing people on Medicaid, like a 2-year limit to how long you can be on Medicaid. By the way, one thing you may not know, Rick, one of the last things he threw into the budget was to eliminate the almost 100-year-old state requirement that employers pay a living wage. That is being repealed by Governor Walker.
Now, I was going to bring that up because to me that is it. The rhetoric, the language is huge because he's changed and as you point out, 100 years, the reference to living wage, which they define as the pay needed to provide minimum comfort, decency, physical, and moral well-being. He wants to rip all that out of any law and replace it with just a simple, basic poverty minimum wage.
And he faced a problem. One of our allies, Wisconsin Jobs Now, who we work with, actually filed a petition with a whole lot of workers all over the state saying they weren't being paid a living wage and demanding Governor Walker act on the law. And so his solution was to deny they weren't being paid a living wage at $7.25 an hour was fine, but then to go and get rid of the law. He also took away the power of local governments to have a living wage for county contracted services. And so literally the way they operate is that they think that our biggest problem in the country is that people are paid too much. They need to lower wages further. They're also cutting prevailing wage, which affects construction workers and anyone, involved in building projects, as you well know, Rick, and know all about.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I find interesting, because you always want to follow the money. Who benefits? Cui bono? At whose benefit? I would argue the Koch brothers, the people who are major funders. And I remember the little phone call he had with the guy he thought was a Koch brother, which kind of laid out some of his thinking, which is kind of scary to me.
Absolutely. He's been very clear, and this is why he's an effective candidate. He also has a big learning curve, but so he's a very dangerous guy, but he is playing to the far right, and the right of the Republican Party, the right of center, is moving further and further right, even over the last couple election cycles. And so, really, when you look at it, Rick, the reason Wisconsin has really horrendous economic performance, it's the worst in the Midwest. It's one of the worst in the country. And in fact, employment is increasing because of the general national recovery, but the poverty rate is still increasing at the same time because 90% of the new jobs being offered are in classifications that are poverty wage classifications.
Right.
And so that slows down the whole economy. People aren't spending in the community, they aren't buying goods, and that decelerates the decline. And so this is a perfect petri dish, a litmus test, really, of what happens when you implement wrong-headed, austerity-based conservative economic policy, which is designed to lower wages.
And to me, I mean, and I think you've hit it squarely where it needs to be placed, that if what he's done in Wisconsin, which I would say arguably has put you guys back 50 to 60 years, if not more, I don't see how that is helpful here to the country as a whole, especially when you're looking at the fact that the conservatives are yelling that, the economy isn't growing fast enough. Here's what we should do instead, something worse.
And they're stunned. You see, Walker is an ideologue, so he actually believes what he's done shouldn't stimulate the economy, and literally wants to mess with the numbers, doesn't believe the federal numbers, etc., because They're not. Their stuff isn't really reality based. It's a very ideological perspective. And so when what everyone said would happen happens, and by the way, part of this is a incredibly corrupt, privatized economic development department, where he privatized the Department of Commerce, which has had no standards, has given money away without testing at all whether any jobs were created to well-connected campaign contributors. So it's been a disaster, but he still is in kind of la-la land and doesn't want to believe the consequences of his own policy.
Let me ask you this, because, and what's interesting about this is, I've heard that argument on every conservative issue. It's just that we haven't done it enough. Free trade's not working because we haven't done it enough. Tax cuts haven't helped because we haven't done it enough. Deregulation, it hasn't done what it was supposed to do because we haven't gone far enough. I got to be honest, in looking at what I've seen in Wisconsin, we've gone too far.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I should have mentioned the gigantic tax giveaways. One of the reasons we're having massive cuts to our education system, our higher education system, is because of massive unaccountable giveaways to wealthier property owners, to manufacturers, without any requirement that jobs be created, that even go to companies that outsource, by the way, Rick. And so we have no revenue, so we're cutting what we need in order to expand opportunity. But you're right, they'll just double down and say it's for some other reason. For a while, he was saying it was because of the protests, which for a long time he was saying that, which you were broadcasting live from, like that had harmed business confidence. And so there's always an excuse for why someone other than them is responsible, but they're all about holding anyone who's down on their luck, who needs a hand up in order to get a piece of the American dream, holding them responsible, but never themselves.
I'm glad you brought up the protests, and you brought up February of 2011, because I think it's important, because that governor is saying that he can handle ISIS, he can take on terrorism, he can take on whatever foreign policy, because he took down those people that handed me sweet potatoes, and the 90-year-old woman who met me with a bratwurst. He took them down so he can fight ISIS. And I got to tell you, that comparison, as someone who was on the ground there and saw firsthand the wonderful people of Wisconsin coming out and exercising their constitutionally guaranteed right to redress of their government, I find it despicable at the least that he would compare the two.
And anyone who was there, like you were, Rick, knows that it was nothing like a mob. These were average folks from all over the state, just trying to make sure to protect some element of the American dream of themselves and for their children. And Walker and his cronies tried very hard to frame them as a mob. They claimed that they were dangerous. They claimed that somehow these were not real Wisconsinites. There was nothing further from the truth. And I guess the coup de grace, you're right, is comparing them to ISIS. And now we get into, in these primaries, he's transitioned from that to an absolutely kind of Goldwater-esque foreign policy position, where he says we have to proactively and preemptively attack all the terrorists wherever they are in the world right away.
All right. Well, what are we, about 4% of the population? We're going to attack everyone who disagrees with us all at once. It's going to be a very interesting couple of years under his leadership.
Well, let's hope we don't get to that stage. I mean, the National Labor Relations Act isn't safe either if he becomes president.
So last line of questioning I've got for you, what are you expecting? Because Trump is now the guy. Do you expect Walker to skyrocket right to the top of that poll?
You said it's a clown car. You're right. It's such a crazy primary. It's hard to tell who will catch fire. I mean, a lot of people think that Walker is very well positioned because he has the Koch brothers' support. And he has managed to play to the farthest right side of the base and excite the base. But no one predicted this Trump phenomenon. We don't know if that's permanent or not. There's no real organization. It's just Trump going on national television interview shows. So it's hard to say if that tosses thing up. But from what I understand, people think that the candidates with the strongest kind of operations and possible appeal right now, barring changes that we can't predict, are Bush, Rubio, and Walker. So Walker has a real shot, and has a real shot to win Iowa. He's way up in Iowa and have momentum moving forward to New Hampshire and South Carolina.
Wow. The only thing I can think of is be afraid. Be very afraid.
I agree.
Robert, I appreciate you taking time for me. As this continues, we'd love to have you come back and tell us all of the other joys and wild successes that the governor has had in your great state.
Always a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Rick. Thanks for keeping up on this.
Always great talking with you. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action of Wisconsin. We've got a link to their website, citizenactionwi.org. You can get there from thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Robert Craig's name. Take you right there. Sad. Scary. I'll tell you. Absolutely scary. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Really crazy. I will wait till she betrayed me. Now my vision is no longer hazy. I'm very lucky to have my crew. They stood by me when she flew. I've been knocked down, beat down, black and blue. She's not the one coming back for you. She's not the one coming back for you. If I fall back down, you're gonna help me back up again. If I fall back down, you're gonna be my friend.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1902. A powerful gas and dust explosion occurred in the Rolling Mill Mine in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown was rich in coal resources. The coal industry in Cambria County gradually grew thanks to the rise of the industry in the region. The first large-scale mining in Cambria County occurred in 1856, when the newly formed Cambria Iron Company opened the Rolling Mill Mine. Most of the miners who were killed were recent immigrants from Central and Eastern Europe. 110 miners were killed in the explosion. The explosion was caused by fire damp, a term used by miners to mean a mixture of methane gas. Miners working in one section of the mine were killed immediately, while many other miners were killed by afterdamp, an asphyxiating gas that spread through the mine as the miners tried to flee to the only other exit from the mine. The mine reopened on July 14th. However, the disaster devastated the immigrant community in Johnstown and prompted calls for investigations and greater mine safety measures. The Rolling Mill Mine continued to operate until 1931. In the mine's latter years, it was part of the Bethlehem Mines Corporation. The Rolling Mill Mine disaster still ranks as one of the deadliest mining accidents in the history of mining in this country. There are still mine disasters to this day. In March of 2015, there was a deadly mine collapse at the Murray Energy coal mine in Marshall County, West Virginia. Thus, we remember that all workers deserve to work in a safe environment.
Come on, you young fellas, so brave and so fine.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Way down in the mine, it'll foam like a heaven.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've talked of how hard it is to pinpoint a war's beginning, but in 1955, the U.S. sent soldiers to Saigon on a classified training mission hidden from the American public. We mentioned the tensions between a radio man and his crew chief, Fitzgibbons. So one hot summer night on the streets of Saigon, the radio man shot and killed his crew chief. It was June 8th, 1956. The Pentagon officially set the beginning of the war at 1962, and veterans on Fitz's mission were just listed as serving in foreign countries. Until more than 40 years later, after declassification of the mission and a high-level DoD review urged by Fitz's family, when the official beginning of the war was changed to 1955. Finally, on Veterans Day 1998, the name of Richard Fitzgibbon was carved into the Vietnam War Memorial, the earliest date of death on the wall. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. I go back to that February 2011, and I think I've told this story before. As it was beginning, right at the very beginning, when the college students at the University of Wisconsin had actually read the governor's budget and looked at all of the insanity that was in it. I mean, it was a right-wing wet dream is basically what it was. And they said, wait a second, we can't do this, and that. This is bad for teachers. This is bad for taxpayers. This is bad for students, because it went after and it tried to gut a whole ton of education funding, not just for K through 12, but also higher ed. There's a whole bunch of insanity in there. And oh, by the way, we're going to take collective bargaining rights away and tenure and do all of the right-wing wish list stuff. And the students said, no, this is a bad idea. And then Walker said, well, if those people go on strike, we'll call out the National Guard. And those college students who had read this stuff and were thinking back to their 8th grade labor history class, because in Wisconsin I'm surprised they haven't gone after that, to be honest. But in Wisconsin, the curriculum has for a semester of some labor education. So they remembered back to, shooting striking workers in the back, and, the governor's calling out the National Guard to crush Homestead, or, all across the country, the mine wars that were going on, use the National Guard to go out and shoot these people. And they said, well, wait a second, a governor calling out the National Guard can't be good. So they went to the Capitol and they occupied the Capitol. And we here at the program said, this is that moment in history. This is going to be something. We've got to get there. This is huge. And we went out, we spent 9 days sleeping in the Capitol, broadcasting from inside the Capitol and talking to people and being on the ground. And I remember the drive out, and it's a fairly lengthy drive to Madison. And poor Jake, my friend, who wanted to come along, and my former producer Brett, all their eyes were yellow because we only stopped twice, and that was for gas. So you can get why their eyes were yellow. Because as a truck driver, I don't stop. If we run out of gas, then we have to stop. But we go to get there. So I'm hearing these news reports that there's this violence, and there's this unruly mob, and I'm look, I grew up in a housing project, a little rumbling, I'm okay with that, a little knocking around, bumping stuff, I get it, okay. So we get there, and I swear, the first person that we run into, we didn't actually run into them. The first person we came across helped us find a parking space. Yeah, you can go over that, and then there's a parking garage. Go park over there. Yeah, go. So we're walking up to the Capitol, and it's snow on the ground. It's cold as you know what. So we're walking, and there's a woman in a wheelchair sitting there next to a giant cooler full of sweet potatoes. And I'm going, wait a second. Who comes to a protest with a giant, one of those like 5-foot long coolers, you've seen them, that have like different, whole bunch of different entire thing filled with sweet potatoes. And they were warm, and I don't eat sweet potatoes, but I thanked her and moved on. But the next older lady offered me a bratwurst, and I was all over that. And I'm going, where's the, and I go to, where's the bumping around? Where's the unrest? Where's the chaos? I'm not seeing it. So we go inside the Capitol, and everything is orderly. They have a place set up for, an area that, if you need help, like an information desk. They have a little area for food. They have a little area for healthcare. And by the end of the time we were there, they had crews of people who went around to clean. They had crews of people that went around to make sure everyone was okay, that people had water. And, the chance of this is what democracy looks like really stuck into my head, because it was a community of people taking care of each other, making sure everyone was okay, and that the needs of the community were met. And it just seemed very odd to me that you were seeing this amazing display of community in a place where they were trying to destroy just that. And I look at that time period as something that really is extremely important, especially come Monday, when the guy who caused all this, Mr. Divide and Conquer, who in that clip was talking to a billionaire woman named Diane Hendricks, whose name, just so you know, is on the quote-unquote Wall of Freedom at the George W. Bush Library at SMU. They wouldn't tell us how much cash it cost to get on the Wall of Freedom. The big giant granite wall with people's names foot high, etched into them for all of eternity. Wouldn't tell us how much it was. But you could get on the Registry of Freedom for $1,000. Your name would be on there for a year. It was digital. It'd go off in a year. But no amount for the Wall of Freedom. So I look at that time period, and I got to tell you, come Monday, when Walker announces that he's in, and that the billionaires are behind him, the Diane Hendricks of the world, the Koch brothers, and those folks, we in this country had better watch out, because we're going to go back more than 100 years. We're going to go back well before the days of Lochner. We're going to go back to the days of it's the Wild West and the haves and the have-nots. And it's going to be worse than that even. Because everything that they did to build a middle class, everything that they did to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, everything they did to fight for their families is now illegal. And in this day of hyper surveillance, in this day of no privacy, when they make becoming a union member illegal or virtually illegal by allowing people to be blacklisted because, hey, we live in the information age, things are going to get much worse. And Walker's one of those guys who's going to bring the wonders of the no rights at work agenda, not just to Wisconsin, but all across this country. And I hope that people, Democrat, Republican, Independent, I don't care. I hope you take a look at what's going on in Wisconsin, because that kind of success he wants to bring to the nation. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a horrible idea. Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around to listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Take you on, headstrong to take on anyone. I know that you are wrong. Headstrong, we're headstrong. Back off, I'll take you on. Headstrong to take on anyone. I know that you are wrong, and this is not where you belong. I won't give everything away.
This 18.7 billion is just a drop in the bucket.
While we were out, record settlement in BP's oil disaster in the Gulf.
I believe the way to go in coal is to get the technology that can address the issues rather than to put coal out of business.
Former Senator Jim Webb enters the 2016 race. We'll tell you his
terrible
position on climate change. Extreme heat waves shatter records on 4 continents. Plus,
history was made today as the Solar Impulse 2 touchdown at Kalailo Airport.
Solar-powered plane flies into aviation history.
All of that history and more, ironically, in your very near future. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The Supreme Court tossing out the Environmental Protection Agency's first ever rules requiring power plants to cut emissions of mercury and other air pollutants.
This was a big victory for private industry. This is a rare win for the coal industry. It's a victory for business.
You seem really giddy about that victory. You know the losing team in that game was lungs. You know that, right?
Yes, I do. This is your Green News Report.
Lungs, business rules.
Okay, Desi Doyen, after well over a dozen candidates getting into this 2016 race on both the Republican and the Democratic side, we finally have a full-on, all-out denier on the Democratic side entering the race.
Yeah, in politics, former Senator Jim Webb of Virginia has now become the 5th candidate to jump into the race for the 2016 Democratic presidential nomination. Now, we've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the official 2016 candidates, and while former Senator Webb doesn't outright deny climate change,
yes, he does.
He really doesn't want to do anything about it. In the Senate, he voted for expanding oil and gas drilling and stopping the Environmental Protection Agency free from even regulating emissions. Here he is in 2011.
I am not convinced that the Clean Air Act was ever intended to regulate or to classify as a dangerous pollutant something as basic and ubiquitous in our atmosphere as carbon dioxide.
So he doesn't want to do anything about carbon dioxide. He's a believer in, quote, clean coal technology. He fought against the Obama administration when they put a moratorium on offshore drilling during the BP oil spill disaster in the Gulf. And as if all of that is not bad enough,
I'm a strong believer from the time that I was 18 years old in the advantages of nuclear power.
this guy, it's shocking he has a D by his name. And did I say that his position on climate is terrible?
Yes, I believe you did.
All right.
Speaking of the BP oil disaster in the Gulf, it has been a long 5 years since that rig exploded and killed 11 workers, then dumped 200 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Oil giant BP has now agreed to pay $18.7 billion, the largest environmental settlement in the nation's history, to compensate the federal government and 5 Gulf states for environmental and economic damages. But as journalist Antonia Juhas told Nicole Sandler on the broadcast earlier this week, BP is getting off easy.
The amount of the settlement doesn't meet BP's legal obligations. It doesn't meet the cost necessary to restore the Gulf, which BP is required to do under the Oil Pollution Act. And it certainly doesn't dissuade other actors from behaving in the same type of grossly negligent behavior, which a federal judge said that BP did.
Remember, no prosecutions have occurred of BP executives, and if this settlement is approved by the court, BP gets to spread those payments over 18 years.
Oh, it's nice to be a corporation.
Meanwhile, extreme persistent heat waves are shattering records across 4 continents. In the U.S., an extreme heat wave in Washington state broke all-time state temperature records. Weather Underground's Dr. Jeff Masters says what's surprising is not just the number of locations breaking all these records, but by how much the records are being broken. 4 to 5 degrees or more over the previous records. In Europe, the UK recorded its hottest July temperature ever, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. 3 other nations also broke their all-time national heat records: the Netherlands, Thailand, and Colombia. But Germany beat them all, breaking its all-time record for hottest temperature ever recorded in the entire country on Sunday at 104 degrees.
You know what we need? Some more clean coal. Am I right, Jim Webb?
And finally,
in a plane without a drop of fuel. 5 days, 5 nights. A flight that many thought would not be possible.
the 100% solar-powered plane, the Solar Impulse 2, landed safely in Hawaii after completing a record-breaking and dangerous non-stop flight across the Pacific Ocean. The 5-day, 5-night non-stop flight broke 2 records: longest plane flight powered only by the sun, and the longest non-stop solo flight in world history. It now heads to Phoenix on its historic trip around the world to bring attention to the promise of clean energy.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Monday morning feels so bad. Everybody seems to agree. Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good. This Wednesday's go so slow. Thursday, I don't know. I got Friday on my mind.
Ah, yes, it is Friday, and thank goodness it is Friday, and a good one at that. I got to be honest. I look at what happened in South Carolina, and yes, for all of the Nikki Haley grandstanding and all of the, hey, look at me politicking and all of the nonsense that's gone around it, you know what happened today? That damn flag, that flag, that big blue X, is no longer on that pole on state grounds, and I think that is a good a good thing. But with it being Friday, it is our Future Friday, which is why we've asked our good friend Isaiah Poole. He is the Director of Online Communications over at the Campaign for America's Future, ourfuture.org, the website. Isaiah, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure.
So outside of all of the politicking and all of the press releases that Nikki Haley has thrown out to make herself look good, good day, right?
Absolutely good day. I was riding to the work and watching on the smartphone the live feed of the flag coming down. And it was a real emotional moment to see them finally take that flag off the pole, fold it, and put it away.
Let me ask you this, as an African-American male in this country, what did that flag mean to you? I mean, because I've heard all of my redneck friends say, give me it's just a battle flag. I say it's a treasonous flag, but what does it mean to you?
You might as well put whites only on hang that sign up. I mean, that's kind of what it meant to men. It was a symbol. And I know there are people who say that it's all about heritage, it's all about Southern pride. You cannot separate the flag. I certainly can't separate that flag from our history of racism, our history of slavery, and our history of Jim Crow and white supremacy. Every time I see that flag, that's what I see. And it really strikes me that when you have a symbol that evokes that much pain and carries that much historical baggage, that anyone would want to hang on to it, pretending that, it means something. It means something different to them than what history has described to it.
Now, some people have described that flag as the American swastika. Something you'd agree with?
Absolutely. I mean, if this were a discussion about swastikas, it would be a totally different discussion. And, no one runs around saying that the swastika is a symbol of German pride or German heritage.
Well, I think there are some. We call those Klan members or skinheads.
Right.
And they're the outliers. And this is the thing that gets me.
That's precisely right. And we know better than to post a most of us anyway, know better than put a swastika on a public place where we know Jewish people are going to be congregating, or where Jewish people will see it and have that painful reminder of the Holocaust and all that was bound up in that. So I can't understand why we can't carry that understanding into the discussion of the Confederate flag.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and I've had a whole bunch of discussions around this, and what today happened, and why I think this is so important is the state of South Carolina said they're no longer going to endorse this. It doesn't mean that the people of South Carolina, if they want to burn it in their front yard, if they want to tattoo it across their forehead, doesn't mean they still can't do that. It just means the state as an institution, as an instrument of we the people, no longer going to recognize that. And I think that's important.
Well, that's important. I don't, very few other stable democracies, and Frank, virtually no other stable democracy allows the insurgents in its midst, after a civil war that those insurgents lost, to run around and pretend as if they are still a legitimate force.
Well, yeah,
and they can still brandish their flag. They can still, do all that. And then in acts of defiance against the government, then brandish that symbol of their insurrection, and expect to be legitimized.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story. I mean, when I first moved into the house that we've now been in for a little over 10 years. The guy who lived behind us, he had the big blue X up on his flagpole and actually had a cannon in his living room. Was a Civil War enactor, as he explained to me. I had never heard that before, but in his view, he thought that, you know, the South was going to rise again, the Civil War would happen again, and they were reenacting what was going to happen, only they thought they could change the ending. And there's part of me that thinks that kind of dangerous thought process is still kind of bubbling under the surface in this country with the people who would display that flag.
It's precisely the kind of thing that the Southern Poverty Law Center and other organizations have actually chronicled. That there is a white supremacy movement that really does want to take control of the country. And, you know, what makes some of what we're hearing on the periphery of the presidential debate so dangerous is that it feeds, it could feed them.
And that, to me, that's scary stuff. It's just scary, scary stuff. Let's move along and talk about something else that is kind of concerning to me. There's a transportation bill, not as divisive yet, but this transportation tax that Chuck Schumer and Rob Portman. And I got to be honest, anything I see Portman's name on, I gotta look at twice. I got to be honest, anything I see Schumer's name on, I look at twice. Tell us about it.
Well, they issued this week what they call a framework for corporate tax reform. And in it is a plan that they say will tax the profits of corporations that have parked their profits overseas. There's about $2 trillion that we've talked about before that corporations
they're hoarding,
have sheltered through offshore.
That's such a nice
tax
word,
havens.
Isaiah. It's way too nice a word. Sheltered. They're hoarding and hiding.
Hoarding and hiding is good. That does say it. It's actually was described. I was listening to a news program this morning where they were talking about the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance, and the Greeks practiced tax evasion, and Americans corporations practice tax avoidance because
Yes.
it's all legal.
Right.
But anyway, the Achilles heel in the Schumer-Portman tax proposal is that when these corporations are taxed, they won't be taxed at anything close to the statutory 35% tax rate that they're supposed to pay. It doesn't say in the document what they will pay, but they do explicitly say they will be substantially lower.
So we're giving the hoarders amnesty on their money.
It's precisely right. That it's basically a form of tax forgiveness that says, okay, you did this thing to avoid paying the taxes you were supposed to pay, so we'll let you get away with almost all of it.
Again.
Yes. And then it sets the stage for a broader tax reform where corporations, which are only paying they're actually paying, the amount they pay in taxes already amounts to only about 2% of the total gross national product as it is. And it's going to be even less. It's going to be even less.
Wow. And what's that going to do for our transportation? I mean, I thought the idea was we're gonna have to do this. We're gonna have to bite the bullet and give them, we're gonna concede to our hostage takers. We're gonna give them the ransom, and maybe we get something out of it. What are we supposed to get out of it?
It probably gets you, under their scenarios, which I'm not quite sure what they're based on, but it's on the presumption that, okay, corporations will bring back a certain amount of money based on, whatever the rate is.
Any guarantees? Guarantees there's job creation? Any guarantees this stuff actually gets done for us?
It may be that, corporations right now, a lot of corporations will do things like park profits overseas, and then what they will do is borrow money against that money,
right,
for stock buybacks, CEO compensation, and other things.
Let me ask you this, Isaiah.
And maybe what they'll do now is that not do the loan, but they'll still do the stock buyback, which is not an investment in their company. It's an attempt basically just to raise the stock price of the company.
Yeah, so
and
they
you get
make-
a few crumbs for transportation investment, but that is what you get. You get crumbs. You
Yeah.
get some incremental additional dollars, but it's not anywhere close to what we actually need.
I mean, we've seen this movie before. During the Bush years, we allowed them to repatriate a boatload of money, and they said we're going to create jobs with it. And what we found out, we actually lost jobs, but they did. They did a whole bunch of pump and dump on the stock, made the CEOs and the shareholders, made them wealthy, and we ended up holding the bag. And I look at this, to me, it's frustrating on a whole bunch of levels because there are no guarantees in this for us. And we end up giving things up. And you mentioned a moment ago about the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. Greece got into the problem it got into because it didn't collect the taxes from the very wealthy people in the country and let the companies run away and not pay the taxes and ended up just building huge debt. Where are the conservatives screaming, hey, you got to pay your fair share? This is the rule. This is the law of the land, like it or not.
Well, let me tell you where the conservatives are. They're actually cutting the IRS budget so that they can't effectively police these corporations. That's
predictable.
What they're doing.
So one of the things that frustrates me, Isaiah, and I look at this, and again, we should have learned from when they did it during the Bush years, and it should have been fixed then, that you say, okay, you can bring that money back. We're going to forgive you. We're going to give you amnesty, but we're going to make sure that you can never do this crime again. You can never park all this money here again. We're going to go to some other taxing authority or some other taxing way of calculation or whatever, so that you're going to pay the taxes you owe.
Yeah, and one of the things that they could do, Congress could do, is simply say that if Apple makes 75% of its profits in the United States, then Apple pays tax on that 75% to the United States. And it doesn't matter whether it shunts, as it does, it shunts its iTunes purchases through an overseas subsidiary, so that whenever I download something on iTunes, that doesn't get taxed in the United States. They do these sort of Google and the other tech industries do these Dutch sandwich kind of deals. But what you tell the companies is that you pay based on the percentage of profit that you earn in the United States. And then if you have operations in France or in Europe or in Asia, you pay taxes to those countries in accordance to
their
what
laws.
they do. Now,
Seems
the
fair.
territorial tax system, basically, it sounds on the surface good, but what it really does and is basically gives an incentive to American corporations to push even more of their operations overseas, so that we cannot tax them.
So even more
And that's a
profits will
big
be going
problem.
through the secret boxes there in the Cayman Islands or Bermuda or somewhere like that.
Right. When what you really need is to say that if you earned $1 here, it gets taxed here.
And I think that's what most people believe is going on. I think most people think that the system is set up just as you've said, that you make the money here, you pay taxes here, not that you've set up some bizarre scheme or a loophole that you've lobbied for. I just think people are tired of all of these games.
People are very tired, and the thing that amazes me about where Congress, especially the Democrats, are going on this, is that we have on our we have a website called populistmajority.org, and we have all kinds of polling data on there that says that 75%, anywhere between 65 and 75% of the public wants corporations to pay more. They believe that corporations are not paying their fair share. Why Democrats would then go in the opposite direction and not ride this wave of populist anger over the way our tax system is working is really troubling. And particularly on this bill where, the strategy seems to be that we're going to use this as part of some wedge to try to get the Republicans to act on a long-term transportation bill. It's a bizarre strategy, I think.
It is a bizarre strategy, and one that I'm hoping will backfire. And then maybe we can have an honest conversation of how we fund our needs by, I don't know, maybe taxing the people who have been given a free pass over the last 40 years.
Well, yeah. Well, for one thing, if we crack down on some of these fossil fuel subsidies, we could get enough money to pay to offset some of this.
Sounds like a good start and something we should be moving moving towards. If you want more information on what the good folks over at the Campaign for America's Future are doing, ourfuture.org is where you go, or you can just go to thericksmithshow.com and click on Isaiah Poole's name. It'll take you right there. Isaiah, I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for filling us in a bit on the this transportation tax and the whole bit. I appreciate it, man.
All right, let's keep up the fight.
All righty, have a great weekend. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
We gotta get old tonight. We gotta do it today. No more mindless confusion. No more disarray. We gotta get old tonight.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
When the Supreme Court ruled that states can no longer ban same-sex marriage, it set off a cacophony of howling hyperbole by the GOP's 14 presidential wannabes. "I will not acquiesce to an imperial court," blustered Mike Huckabee. "Resist and reject judicial tyranny," he bellowed. Huck even couched his cry for continued discrimination against gay people by likening it to Abe Lincoln's principled refusal to honor the court's 1857 ruling that African Americans could not be citizens. Sure, Mike, you're a modern-day Lincoln, except that he was opposing discrimination while you're demanding that government enforce it. Then came the wild hair of the GOP's presidential menagerie, Donnie Trump, blathering that the gay marriage decision is Jeb Bush's fault. Really? The Donald explained that Jeb's brother George had appointed Chief Justice John Roberts to the court, so there you have it. Shh. Let's not spoil Trump's hallucination by telling him that Roberts actually voted against letting gays marry. Now, on to Scott Walker, who's touted as the serious contender. Yet, he's seriously pushing a constitutional amendment to let government keep prohibiting same-sex marriages. No one wants to live in a country where the government coerces people to act in opposition to their conscience, said Scott, apparently oblivious to the fact that state governments have long been coercing LGBT people to do exactly that. And now Walker is promising, if elected, to coerce them right back into a life of unconscionable injustice. This is Jim Hightower saying every one of the 14 Republican presidential candidates is marching backwards into the bigoted past, piously thumbing their noses not only at millions of gays and lesbians, but also at the ever-growing majority of Americans, especially young people, who support marriage equality.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website for ricksmithshow.com. So, interesting story, capitalism winning. There's a doctor in the Detroit, Michigan area, evidently thought it'd be a good idea, good for business, good for profit, good for the bottom line, good to feed the pocket. Thought it'd be a great idea to say, all you folks, you've got cancer, we're going to overtreat, we're going to pump you full of drugs, we're going to come up with this scheme that, I'm going to line my pockets. According to the report, the AP report I saw, the judge sentenced him to 45 years in prison for this massive scheme that collected millions of dollars from insurance companies and poisoned hundreds of people with needless treatments that basically destroyed their health. Well, brittle bones, fried organs, you name it, this guy did it. And the judge said this was a huge, horrific series of criminal acts. Now, the prosecutor, she wanted 175 years in prison, and the doctor wanted 25. He was willing to take 25, and 45 was the number. I find it kind of interesting, the doctor's statement on it. He says, I misused my talents, yes, and permitted this sin to enter me because of power and greed. He said, my quest for power is self-destructive. He said that his patients came to him looking for compassion and care, and he failed them. I would say he did a lot more than just failed them. What do you think? But is 45 years enough? I don't know. You got to wonder, out of this, how many people, are going to lose their lives? How many people are going to die over this? Evidently, his clinic, the Michigan Oncological Center there, had 7 offices in and around the Detroit area. And they did a whole bunch of tests. And, this is one of those things that we never heard during the whole, the practicing defensive medicine. He was practicing, not defensive medicine. Sad. It's a horrible, horrible thing. Anyway, if you've missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me here, rick@thericksmithshow.com. In the next hour, we're going to talk with Pennsylvania State Senator John Eichelberger. Evidently, he claims he's being harassed, that there are people who are harassing him, intimidating him, following him, and he will not be intimidated by the unions. And we're going to find out how that connection comes about in his mind. I'm really very interested in it. And look, I don't agree with intimidating people and doing those kind of things and making threats. But there's a lot of conversation around what exactly it is that is happening or what is being perceived, just kind of a thought. So it's going to be an interesting conversation, I think. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Millions of American workers will become newly eligible for overtime pay under a new Obama administration rule being considered by the Labor Department. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka is urging public support for that proposed overtime pay rules change.
Millions of American workers are closer to earning overtime pay than they have been in a long time. When they get overtime pay, they increase not only their standard of living, but they help the economy. We asked President Obama to go bold, and he did. And now it's our turn to support that proposal. Here's all you have to do. Go on your computer, type in www.aflcio.org/overtime. Put your information in, click on submit, and you're done. 20 seconds. Just think of it. 20 seconds, you can help 11 million people get a raise.
Teamsters Local 357 is suing Republic Airways, alleging the airline broke the law by unilaterally changing pilots' working conditions without an agreement from the union. More than 2,200 Republic pilots are members of that local, and they've been trying to win a fair contract since 2007. Jim Clark, president of Teamsters Local 357, says Republic has had 8 years to come to an agreement. The pilots are seeking a fair contract that spells out pay, benefits, and working conditions so that the company can't give something and take it back at their whim. That's what these hardworking, skilled pilots deserve now, he says, plain and simple. Is Jeb Bush's "people need to work longer hours" comment his version of the infamous Mitt Romney 47% remark? Brad Woodhouse of Americans United for Change.
The suggestion that we don't need to do anything to help people get better wages or get in the middle class. We just need you folks to work harder. It's disgusting. It's inappropriate. It shows how out of touch he is. It is the quintessential 47% comment of this campaign so far.
Linda Tirado is a former low-wage worker and author of Hand to Mouth, Living in Bootstrap America. She says American workers are already working harder than workers in any other industrial democracy.
And to say, we just need you to put in another 10 hours. Well, honey, where are they going to come from? You point me to the good job store. You point me to the overtime. We will do it willingly. But don't tell me I have to go out and create that opportunity for myself and that it's a one-way discussion and that it's entirely on the workers of America to get this done. I think that there are solutions outside just telling the American people that they're not working hard enough.
WIN is made possible in part through underwriting support from OPEIU and from the National Association of Letter Carriers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
People shuffling their feet. People sleeping in their shoes.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So today I came across a story. It was all over my Twitter feed. Was all in the news. My state senator, I live in the creatively drawn 30th senatorial district. My senator is now John Eichelberger. He is claiming that the unions, PSEA, and the teachers are threatening, harassing, attempting to intimidate. That's my take on it. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity for me to reach out to the good senator with whom, right from the start, I'm going to tell you, I disagree with on just about everything policy-wise you can throw out. But I thought it was a good opportunity to reach across the aisle and say, hey, let's talk about that. That's why I've got the good senator on the line. Senator Eichelberger, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure. Appreciate being on, Rick.
So walk me through this. I read this report that you say that people are calling and harassing you. People see you on the streets and are making gestures. Am I getting this right?
Well, it's a cumulative situation here. That's all part of it. That's true.
So let me, because I'm trying to understand how it is that, because you're a state senator, right?
Yes.
Your job is constituent services. So if I call you and I'm not happy with you, because let me tell you right up front, I don't agree with you on pensions. I don't agree with you on the budget. I don't agree with you on the liquor privatization. I am not harassing. I am not intimidating. I don't want to do any of that stuff. I'm just telling you I don't agree with it. Is this what we're talking about?
No, not at all. That's I get that every day. That's fine. That's part of being in public office. I mean, you have a lot of people who disagree with you, and a lot of people that do. And you hope at the end of the day more people do than don't. But it's there's quite a few people that don't agree with every decision that every elected official makes.
Agreed.
Whether they're Republican or Democrat, that's part of the process. What having a reasonable discussion about it, somebody posting something on Facebook, somebody sending you an email or a letter, that's what reasonable people do when they disagree with somebody. Following people or monitoring what they do at home, or watching their offices, or following them out of the Capitol building in the evening, those kinds of things cross the line between having a disagreement over a policy issue and somebody perhaps stalking an elected official.
And you're
which
claiming
is actually criminal.
in the article that I've read, you're claiming that this is coming out of the Pennsylvania State Education Association.
No, actually, they
this is
pretty
their
much
doing.
are explaining it that way. They're the ones that explained it that way, not me.
Okay, because I'm
the
just reading the
person-
newspaper because I want to make sure, because I find it very interesting that someone would say that the union is going to hire people or make people go and follow you, and it sounds a bit paranoid, Senator.
Well, it's not. It's just a realistic situation we're trying to work our way through.
Okay.
I explained one of the radio stations earlier today that I've had my life threatened before. I've had all sorts of crazy things happen to me, which I'm so loyal like officials. I've never gone to the police in those instances because and you just make a gut decision whether you think somebody's going to fall through on something or not. In this case, this cumulative situation where we had an incident about a month and a half ago at the Capitol where somebody followed me. We had this situation where we've had this situation with one school teacher who screams obscenities at me whenever he sees me running. That's gone on for several years now. So
Okay.
that, I never reported that before. So then we have that same.
But there, hold
gentleman-
on, hold on a second.
Okay.
That I'm sorry. Is that something that we should make illegal?
No, I said I never did anything with that. That happens. I think it's absurd. I can't imagine somebody that calls themselves a professional would stoop to that level and do that out on a public street. I mean, it's not the
Yeah,
right way.
it's not of the best, the best manners or decorum or any of that, but it's not something that's illegal, something we would call the police on. Because I'm curious,
I
'cause
imagine
here's where
you
my
could,
problem is,
but I
Senator.
didn't do that. I imagine you could. Some
Okay.
people probably would, but I never did.
Because here's where my problem is, Senator. I know, and as when you took office, you took the oath of office. I do solemnly swear or affirm that
Actually,
I
I
will
affirm.
support, obey,
Actually, I
and
affirm,
defend the Constitution. These folks are just exercising their right to free speech, correct?
To a point. I mean, that part. I mean, let me finish this.
Well, what part of the First Amendment should we change? What part of free speech are we against?
Well, that's what you described. Well, somebody yelling at me, that may be considered free speech. Somebody following me, that's different.
Is it possible they're just going to the same place?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
Is it possible they're just heading in this? You say you're an avid runner. I've read this a number of times. My producer here has actually run by you a number of times and run around you a number of times. Just because you see each other at the same time, does that mean he's stalking you?
No, not at all. If it's coincidence, it's not stalking. When that person that screams obscenities called my office yesterday or 2 days ago, I guess it was now, and said that everyone is watching this, and that he's the one saying that, and he's a school teacher, and the inference is here that there are other people that are working with him in some kind of network to watch me at my home and in my neighborhood.
Okay, so this is where you came to the conclusion that it was the teachers union.
Well, he said that, and then the reporter from the Altoona paper called me and said that he has had several calls this week about me running. So apparently there are several people involved with this. That same teacher, when I went out of my office the other day in the afternoon, was out in front of my office.
So
Now,
let
was
me
that
ask you this.
coincidence? Was it coincidence that all these people, and they're telling people, as he's explaining in his story, they're upset about me reporting them for using government resources on political activity. These are the things that they are explaining to the press. So this isn't me with some kind of conjecture that it's related somehow to the PSEA. I mean, these people are members of the PSEA that are explaining it themselves.
So they're just members. So you can't say that it's the union doing this. And this is where it gets a little conspiratorial to me, Senator, because I know the folks there. They're not going to have a board meeting. They're not going to sit down and say, hey, let's go hire so-and-so to go after them and make him feel uncomfortable. I just find that very difficult to believe, sir.
Well, I don't think they're hiring anybody. I think a few people that probably live in that same area have gotten together and said, we're gonna watch what he does.
Yeah, because
And then we're gonna
your
call it into the
agenda,
press
Senator,
every time.
to be honest, your agenda is fairly radical. I mean, can you see that by doing what you're doing, by going after their pensions, by going after security, job security, going after their reputations, this idea that, they're bad teachers, they're failures, all of this heated rhetoric is not good for discourse on some level?
Well, I tell you, the stuff that I may say publicly is much tamer than the things that I get from them on a daily basis. I can tell you that.
But what you're talking about, what
heated
we're talking
rhetoric,
about
I
here,
mean,
Senator, is radical change. You're talking about a radical agenda that you guys are pursuing to drastically change how things have been done in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And many people would argue not for the good.
Well, some people argue that. A lot of us would argue it is for the good. And
And we can have that back and forth. But at the end of this, what you're talking about is a couple of people have called your office. They're all folks saying that we don't agree with your agenda. We're watching you, and that could be we're watching you legislatively, couldn't it be?
No, not when they're calling the paper and saying specifically what I'm doing. They say, I saw him running at a specific time.
My producer said he saw you running not too long ago.
Okay.
So is he stalking you?
No, I don't think he is, but maybe he is. I don't think so. Where does he run down at the river?
Yeah, he runs down at the front. Now you've just given away the location of where you run. Now everyone's going to be watching.
Well, everybody in Harrisburg, most people in Harrisburg run down at the river.
In fact, I'll tell my producer to say hello next time he sees you, and
Please
to remind
do,
you that
yeah.
he's not trying to harass or intimidate.
No, I'm sure he's not.
I mean, but here's
as
the
long
thing.
as he doesn't scream obscenities at me, I'd appreciate that.
All
He
right, well,
wouldn't
there's
do that,
something.
yeah.
But here's the thing. I think, being in the public eye, sometimes you're going to get some of this stuff. I mean, my problem with this, look, I've had the same kind of threats doing this program. I can't tell you how many Tea Party people have come after me and accosted me in parking lots and the whole 9 yards. So on a certain level, I feel you if something actually is going on.
You're right. I can appreciate that. Yeah, you would have a better understanding of this. That's right. I agree.
But I got to be honest, at no point, and maybe it's just my different mentality in this, at no point do I call the police and say that, someone's calling me saying they're watching. That just, it seems to me, and this is where my thought is, it seems to me that this is a ploy to make the PSEA look bad. And look, I understand you got a problem with the teachers and the unions. That's your deal. But it just seemed to me to be kind of a ploy.
Well, I can understand that, but here's my greater concern on this. My staff has become pretty edgy over this, particularly when that man was out front of the office the other day. Now, that might have been coincidence. I don't know. But there's a lot of coincidence here, and maybe it's more than that. The other thing is, and I hate to say this publicly, but the bad people could figure this out if they wanted to do something anyway, the thieves and people that do these kinds of things. But people that are in these positions, legislators, we're away from home quite a bit. And my wife's at home by herself. And it's a little unnerving when you think that somebody is watching what you're doing at your home, and they know when you come and go. And I just think that's a problem.
I feel the same way. We can agree on that. See, there's some bipartisanship here because I agree with you on that. But here's what a lot of my friends who are in law enforcement have told me. It's not the one who's screaming at you to worry about. So that the guy who maybe he just happens to be walking by your office and going to the post office or going here and he doesn't like you and he waves and tells you how wonderful you are. Maybe that's possible. I don't know. But at the end of it, to me, that's part of what is great about this country. You have the right to express yourself. And that's part of the First Amendment. And you shouldn't be locked up for it and have the police knocking on your door.
Well, I don't disagree with that. And I don't think that's going to happen here. And I'm not advocating for that at all. Yeah, I'm not advocating. I'm just saying what I was advised to do by an attorney is just report it in case anything would escalate. They have something on record. They can keep an eye on the house for you, particularly when you're gone. And just let it alone at that, and we'll see what happens from there. And that's what we're doing.
My problem is, look, you do that stuff because you're protecting yourself and your family, and I'm with you 110%. My problem is that we've made now a story out of this. Now it comes to my desk. Now I see this, and it looks to me like a political ploy. That's really it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to defend yourself and your family and take care of them. No one would say that. My problem with it is this. Now we're putting this out and we're making this a political issue, and we're attacking someone who I don't think is at all involved in this.
Well, let me remind you of this. They went to the press before I did. Because
they were being accused of doing this. They're defending themselves. Look, at the end of this, are they encouraging their members to call your office to change your mind, to lobby you, to say, John, this is a bad idea? Yes, they are, and they should be. Sure. They would be derelict of duty if they didn't.
Sure. I understand that fully. Absolutely. That's part of the system.
So while I've got you on the line, in looking at this pension reform, which, every economist I've talked to has said financially it's a disaster. Can I get you to change your mind on how bad this switch to a defined contribution is going to be?
I think you're talking to the wrong economists. I mean, I've talked to a number of them too. I've held hearings. I chair the finance committee, and we held a hearing on this. Had a number of people testify, and we think it was sound policy.
Okay.
We've got to do something. And the thing is, if we don't make changes, this fund is rapidly depleting. If I were and I'm in that fund. I'm in these funds. You know, I'm in the SERS fund, and of course the PSERS fund serves the public school people. I would say, look, we've got to make some changes here, or one of these days it's going to be out of money, and I don't want to be an annuitant somewhere down the road, and the state say we don't have the funding to pay this bill.
And agreed, there's some problem here, and I guess my big problem with it is, had we just paid our bills, we probably wouldn't be in this mess. It seems to me that
that's not entirely true.
Well, it's for the most part, it's true. I mean, if you look at that and you look at the fact that we had the collapse, that's a part of it.
It's a significant part of it, but it's 45% of the problem. 55% of the problem is the combination of the generosity of the fund and the fact that when they changed it in 2001, they made it retroactive. We lost $30 billion doing that. We never had that repaid. So we're out a lot of money because of the generosity of the fund and the retroactivity of the change. And then 45% of the problem is the fact that the state didn't pay their bills. And that's another reason why I tell people, you can't trust government to run these programs.
But you're government, John. You're the guy who did this.
And I tell people, don't trust the legislature or anybody, because these funds, and you know, the PSCA, for example, they advocated for every one of these changes. They love it whenever funding's deferred and the schools have more money to spend on them and other programs at school.
That's their job. That is their job. We can't blame them for bad policy passed by our General Assembly. Come on, you know that.
I think that's disingenuous for the unions to say it's all somebody's fault when they're down there pounding on doors saying, please do this. And then whenever it's done, they say, well, that was a big, you know, in retrospect, that was a big mistake. You guys were stupid for doing that. Well, you told us to do it.
Well,
I wasn't here for any of those decisions, but I'm telling you, that's the way these decisions went down. But my point is, you can't trust the government entity that's elected to run these plans because we changed things. You know, the governor right now is proposing a $3 billion bond deal that's illegal. So he wants us to change the law so that he can do the bond deal. I mean, in a whim, from administration to administration, from Republican leadership to Democrat leadership, when we have extra money, when money's tight, when we want to defer payments, whatever it is, people say, you know what, this year we're going to change things. We're not going to follow the plan, we're going to change. And if you deviate from this, you screw it up. And that's why you can't trust government to run these plans. That's why we can't have these defined benefit plans any longer in government, because they don't work.
They do absolutely do work. If they were administered properly and we didn't have all of this whim of the political world, you're right. This is where politicians probably should not be involved in it on a certain level. But here's the problem I have. Because you said that the bond thing's illegal, and I've heard on the other side that what you guys have proposed is unconstitutional in the whole 9 yards. No one seemed to have a problem when they did the unemployment comp bill a couple of years ago to take out an enormous bond to pay back the unemployment comp money that we weren't putting in because we hadn't raised the taxes on employers in 25 years. And then we had the audacity to take out this massive bond and give them a tax cut on top of it. That's the kind of stuff that drives people nuts as well. So why were we okay with one but not the other? It seems rational to me.
Because the payment situation was much different. The way that was structured was we were paying money out, but the arbitrage on that, we profited by the arbitrage on that. That was a done deal. We knew exactly, we could calculate out what we were saving in payments, and that worked for us. In a pension obligation bond, we're playing the market. And I've read national bond publications that say this is not the time to play the market. That's a very dangerous roll of dice for us right now. That's an entirely different situation.
The time to do that probably would have been 4 years ago when you guys had absolute dictatorial power and interest rates were a little bit lower, I think. Just kind of my thought on it.
Yeah, you might be right. And I'm not a market advisor by any stretch, but I know there are times to do it that are plausible, and then there are times they say, you know, the way the market is, this is not it. And that's what I've been reading, that the national they say, and I don't know of any other state that's entering into that kind of thought right now because they think the market's not time for that.
Now, let me ask you last bit of questioning. A lot of people are starting to worry about the budget. Evidently, our governor just pulled off the hat trick of vetoes of what I would say is some pretty bad legislation. What are you guys doing to maybe not let this get into August, September, October? What are you guys doing?
Well, the Senate's going back in on Monday. We've been in meetings on a regular basis. My staff's been in meetings with the governor's staff, I think, twice this week. And the governor seems to still be talking about the same issues he was talking about in March. And it seems like the history of what we've done here for the last several months just doesn't exist. And I don't know where we go from here. I mean, there's got to be significant compromise on his part. I think that the legislature
and
will
on your
compromise. That's what I'm saying. I think that the legislature will compromise at least to a degree. He, at this point, doesn't seem to be willing to compromise at all. And it's going to have to happen. I mean, the Democrats, Rick, aren't supporting this budget. And I talked to a hospital administrator today that told me he met with 3 Democrats this week, and they all said, we can't support what the governor's asking for. He's got to come way down on his tax ask.
And that's why you sit down and bargain at the table. And the hope is you guys will do this, because I don't think folks want this to go into September. I think you guys need to get back to work and hammer this out. But John, it was really great talking with you. I appreciate the time. And just so you know, I disagree with you, but I'm not attempting to intimidate or harass you at all. All right.
Likewise, I'm not. Make sure your producer says hi to me when he sees me down at the river.
I will make sure he does, and he won't be attempting to harass or intimidate you either. All right.
Fair enough.
Thanks so much, Senator. Great talking with you. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Don't know much about history. Don't know much biology. Don't know much about the science book. Don't know much about the French I took. But I do know that I need you. And if you fall for all the crap I spew, what a wonderful world this would be.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1902. A powerful gas and dust explosion occurred in the Rolling Mill Mine in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown was rich in coal resources. The coal industry in Cambria County gradually grew thanks to the rise of the industry in the region. The first large-scale mining in Cambria County occurred in 1856, when the newly formed Cambria Iron Company opened the Rolling Mill Mine. Most of the miners who were killed were recent immigrants from Central and Eastern Europe. 110 miners were killed in the explosion. The explosion was caused by fire damp, a term used by miners to mean a mixture of methane gas. Miners working in one section of the mine were killed immediately, while many other miners were killed by afterdamp, an asphyxiating gas that spread through the mine as the miners tried to flee to the only other exit from the mine. The mine reopened on July 14th. However, the disaster devastated the immigrant community in Johnstown and prompted calls for investigations and greater mine safety measures. The Rolling Mill Mine continued to operate until 1931. In the mine's latter years, it was part of the Bethlehem Mines Corporation. The Rolling Mill Mine disaster still ranks as one of the deadliest mining accidents in the history of mining in this country. There are still mine disasters to this day. In March of 2015, there was a deadly mine collapse at the Murray Energy coal mine in Marshall County, West Virginia. Thus, we remember that all workers deserve to work in a safe environment.
Come on, you young fellas, so brave and so fine.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Way down in the mine, it'll foam like a habit.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've talked of how hard it is to pinpoint a war's beginning, but in 1955, the U.S. sent soldiers to Saigon on a classified training mission hidden from the American public. We mentioned the tensions between a radio man and his crew chief, Fitzgibbons. So one hot summer night on the streets of Saigon, the radio man shot and killed his crew chief. It was June 8th, 1956. The Pentagon officially set the beginning of the war at 1962, and veterans on Fitz's mission were just listed as serving in foreign countries. Until more than 40 years later, after declassification of the mission and a high-level DoD review urged by Fitz's family, when the official beginning of the war was changed to 1955. Finally, on Veterans Day 1998, the name of Richard Fitzgibbon was carved into the Vietnam War Memorial, the earliest date of death on the wall. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen! You're up, you're down, I'll come work you out. You get a good thing going, then you blow yourself out. City by yourself, destroyer. City by yourself, destroyer.
Well, that didn't go bad, did it? Interesting conversation with the senator there. And like I said, look, there's virtually nothing I agree with him on when it comes to policy. The whole push towards destroying the defined benefit and pushing for this contribution thing hasn't worked out in the private sector. Definitely not going to work out in the public sector. And I like the fact that it wasn't me, but still can't trust me. I just find that kind of a politician very interesting. We're untrustworthy, and then we're gonna set out that. On the pension issue, I have to be honest. I look at this and I want to encourage the defined benefit pension plan for retirees so that you have some security like my grandmother has. And I look at my grandmother's generation, who, they worked their entire lives. They put a little savings away. They had their savings. They also have a little Social Security, but they had that pension from where they worked. And, at the end of this, you have to ask the question, what kind of a society are we going to end up down the road? What kind of a society, what kind of a world are we going to live in when people are not going to be able to retire? And, I look at this and, I think about myself. As I move down the road towards retirement, the 25 years, you start going, where exactly am I going to be? Now, I'm pretty fortunate. I have a defined benefit plan that will give me some income as I get older, and it will last my entire life because or at least a portion of it, because of the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which, again, we've set up systems that allow companies to underfund and write off and do all of these games and these gimmicks and not pay the bills. And it's the workers who end up getting screwed. So I would like to see someone like Eichelberger step forward and say, you know what, we're going to make sure that people don't get the shaft. We're going to make sure our government pays their bills. And I didn't bring it up because I actually forgot to, that in the Senate Republicans spreadsheet, they actually thought that they would not fund the pension again this year. They talked about, I think it was $175 million in savings from not paying what they owe. I wish I could not pay my mortgage and call it savings. I wish I could not pay into my kid's college fund and call it savings, or not pay the electric bill, or not pay the cable bill and just call that savings. Wish I could. Can't. And this is my problem with some types of politicians. You have to pay your bills. It's that simple. And look, sometimes having to raise taxes is tough. Sometimes it is. But you've got to, and look, this is one of the reasons that I have some respect for George H.W. Bush. When he took office, the whole read my lips, no new taxes thing, he got the books and he go, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. Bad math. And he actually raised taxes a little bit to help balance that deficit. Didn't actually do it, but helped. So I look at this, and again, it's the leadership. That's where I struggle. But interesting. I got to give the senator credit. He is one of the only senators who I've asked to come on the program, one of the only Republicans that I've asked to come on who's actually done it. So I give him credit for that. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
This 18.7 billion is just a drop in the bucket.
While we were out, record settlement in BP's oil disaster in the Gulf.
I believe the way to go in coal is to get the technology that can address the issues rather than to put coal out of business.
Former Senator Jim Webb enters the 2016 race. We'll tell you his
terrible
position on climate change. Extreme heat waves shatter records on 4 continents. Plus,
history was made today as the Solar Impulse 2 touchdown at Kalilo Airport.
solar-powered plane flies into aviation history.
All of that history and more, ironically, in your very near future. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The Supreme Court tossing out the Environmental Protection Agency's first ever rules requiring power plants to cut emissions of mercury and other air pollutants.
This was a big victory for private industry. This is a rare win for the coal industry. It's a victory for business.
You seem really giddy about that victory. You know the losing team in that game was lungs. You know that, right?
Yes, I do. This is your Green News Report.
Lungs, business rules.
Okay, Desi Doyen, after well over a dozen candidates getting into this 2016 race on both the Republican and the Democratic side, we finally have a full-on, all-out denier on the Democratic side entering the race.
Yeah, in politics, former Senator Jim Webb of Virginia has now become the 5th candidate to jump into the race for the 2016 Democratic presidential nomination. Now, we've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the official 2016 candidates, and while former Senator Webb doesn't outright deny climate change,
yes, he does.
He really doesn't want to do anything about it. In the Senate, he voted for expanding oil and gas drilling and stopping the Environmental Protection Agency from even regulating emissions. Here he is in 2011.
I am not convinced that the Clean Air Act was ever intended to regulate or to classify as a dangerous pollutant something as basic and ubiquitous in our atmosphere as carbon dioxide.
So he doesn't want to do anything about carbon dioxide. He's a believer in, quote, clean coal technology. He fought against the Obama administration when they put a moratorium on offshore drilling during the BP oil spill disaster in the Gulf. And as if all of that is not bad enough,
I'm a strong believer from the time that I was 18 years old in the advantages of nuclear power.
This guy, it's shocking he has a D by his name. And did I say that his position on climate is terrible?
Yes, I believe you did.
All right.
Speaking of the BP oil disaster in the Gulf, it has been a long 5 years since that rig exploded and killed 11 workers, then dumped 200 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Oil giant BP has now agreed to pay $18.7 billion, the largest environmental settlement in the nation's history, to compensate the federal government and 5 Gulf states for environmental and economic damages. But as journalist Antonia Juhas told Nicole Sandler on the broadcast earlier this week, BP is getting off easy.
The amount of the settlement doesn't meet BP's legal obligations. It doesn't meet the cost necessary to restore the Gulf, which BP is required to do under the Oil Pollution Act. And it certainly doesn't dissuade other actors from behaving in the same type of grossly negligent behavior, which a federal judge said that BP did.
Remember, no prosecutions have occurred of BP executives, and if this settlement is approved by the court, BP gets to spread those payments over 18 years.
Oh, it's nice to be a corporation.
Meanwhile, extreme persistent heat waves are shattering records across 4 continents. In the U.S., an extreme heat wave in Washington state broke all-time state temperature records. Weather Underground's Dr. Jeff Masters says what's surprising is not just the number of locations breaking all these records, but by how much the records are being broken. 4 to 5 degrees or more over the previous records. In Europe, the UK recorded its hottest July temperature ever, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. 3 other nations also broke their all-time national heat records: the Netherlands, Thailand, and Colombia. But Germany beat them all, breaking its all-time record for hottest temperature ever recorded in the entire country on Sunday at 104 degrees.
You know what we need? Some more clean coal. Am I right, Jim Webb?
And finally,
in a plane without a drop of fuel. 5 days, 5 nights. A flight that many thought would not be possible.
the 100% solar-powered plane, the Solar Impulse 2, landed safely in Hawaii after completing a record-breaking and dangerous non-stop flight across the Pacific Ocean. The 5-day, 5-night non-stop flight broke 2 records: longest plane flight powered only by the sun, and the longest non-stop solo flight in world history. It now heads to Phoenix on its historic trip around the world to bring attention to the promise of clean energy.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. The website, ricksmithshow.com. Let's find out what's going on around the world. We got Luke Vargas in New York at the United Nations. Give us an update from Talk Radio News Service. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, always a pleasure to join you.
So what's going on in the world? How are things in China? Everything all wonderful and economy back on its feet? Everybody, that $3.7 trillion back in the coffers?
Hardly, though we've seen, I guess, a little bit of a market comeback. But geez, I mean, I think it's increasingly difficult to say that the Chinese stock market is even a market in really any terms that we're familiar with. There have been so many regulations and restrictions put on this, from sort of blocking new IPOs. You had, I think, on Wednesday, the Chinese government saying that anybody with a controlling stake in a company or any company managers would be forbidden from even decreasing their holdings at all over the next 6 months. So if people want to be selling, they're not even allowed to do it. So
and that interest was,
what kind of market is this?
What was weird to me is anybody with more than 5% interest in a company couldn't sell it.
That's right.
And I'm going, wow, I understand if you owned half the company, don't dump it. But as little as 5%, that seemed, wow.
Yeah, and one thing that economists have been drawing into focus quite a lot, and those, a select number of them have really been freaking out about, is the fact that the government is now going to allow Chinese homeowners to use their homes as collateral to take out loans to buy more stocks, which they warn is actually just going to, further worsen sort of the economic problems that got the country into this mess in the first place. That we've been hearing about the triple bubble this week. The Credit Suisse using those terms, saying there's both a credit, insurance, and real estate market bubble occurring all at once here. And that real estate market bubble in no way be alleviated by having people start to borrow money on the value of their homes. So who knows whether these sort of reforms, which are being rushed through the Chinese government in haste, are actually going to be to the detriment of their economy in the long term. But geez, they are really pulling out all the stops to try to salvage these drops.
Yeah, that would sound, it'd be kind of like here in Pennsylvania if the General Assembly decided we're going to let people mortgage their homes to buy lottery tickets so we can pay off our pension obligations.
I roll my eyes whenever I see the language used by the New York government in
Wall
promoting
Street
the lottery
crowd,
on the subway. It seems almost as crazy as what you just suggested.
Jeez. But a triple bubble, wow. When I was a kid, we used to chew double bubble, and that was a mouthful. Triple bubble now, wow.
it's a term you're not going to be able to read much about online because there's just not much of a precedent for it. So again, I think we're into uncharted territory.
So what does that mean for us? I mean, let's say their economy does go bust. They hit a lost decade like Japan. What does that mean to us?
It's a great question. There have been a lot of people saying this week that the Greece is really the economic drama that's more fun to cover. But when it comes down to what the impact is on especially the American market, the Chinese, the drop they've seen in their stock market just in the last 3 weeks, I think, is of a value 6 times greater than Greece's total foreign debt. So numerically speaking, this is a much more consequential economic problem. I mean, there's some factors here, I think, that, will prevent this from spiraling out of control as far as the Chinese consumer is concerned. And in many ways, you talk about major American corporations like Apple, whose shareholders have been nervous the past few weeks because, sales of the iPhone in China are a huge, economic driver for them. If the stock market keeps crashing there, people lose their disposable income, and they maybe wouldn't be shelling out for $500, $600 phones. It's worth pointing out, though, what they call the savings ratio in China is very different than it is in the United States, where I believe 30% of the average household wealth is in equities. In China, it's about a third of that. So again, there are, I guess, reasons to be hopeful that maybe this will hurt some Chinese businessmen. It is hurting a substantial number of regular Chinese homeowners and investors, but it may be not quite as bad as if we had as big of a drop as in the American stock market.
Yeah, but comparing this to Greece, it's easy to beat up on Greece. It's a socialist with their pensions and all of that stuff. I mean, China's was the capitalist dream. I mean, they're capitalists. See, it's wonderful. It's good. It's capitalism, and that's not doing so well right now.
No, and they were really hoping that a sort of steady multi-year increase in the Chinese stock markets would be able to help sort of patch over some of the bigger structural problems in the country. And so, it comes back to bite you, I guess, sometimes. It doesn't always go the way you planned.
Yeah, and looking at Greece, though, I guess their banks need a boatload of cash just to stay afloat. How screwed are they?
Pretty screwed, it seems. Though, again, this is not completely fatal, but they do need some sort of infusion of cash just to be able to keep processing withdrawals, even if there is a bailout agreed to on Sunday. We're hearing there's only about 750 million euros worth of cash left in these banks, and that their sort of cash reserves will probably run out on Monday. The warning we heard today, though, from the head of several Greek banks was that even if that bailout is agreed to, these banks can't open right away. I mean, it's going to take some time to get cash there, to be able to sort of, prepare themselves for a reopening. So we could be looking at an even longer closure of these banks. And how you finance this sort of recapitalization is going to be a pretty, sticky proposition to sort out. It's unlikely that this would be a European bailout to do it. It would likely be a bail-in, something we last saw sort of in high profile 2 years ago in Cyprus, when the Cypriot government closed banks for a short period of time and sort of took a haircut to people's savings and checking accounts in order to recapitalize banks. So there is talk that might happen in Greece, that it would be either cuts to bank shareholders, to bondholders, or potentially to individual depositors themselves. There are some reasons why that wouldn't be so easy in Greece. I know in Cyprus, one of the reasons they were able to fix that recapitalization issue so quickly is there were a lot of wealthy people who used Cyprus as a tax haven. A lot of Russians and other Eastern European, wealthy individuals had bank accounts in Cyprus. And so there was sort of enough money to pull from there. Not quite the case as much in Greece. So they may need to look sort of in more creative locations for that recapitalization, but sort of an interesting filter to put on an additional issue to the main one that we're going to be hearing about on Sunday.
And I'm sure maybe you don't, but at this point, who in their right mind has any money in the Greek banks?
Well, people have been withdrawing in tremendous amounts since December. I think the number is $34 billion in cash withdrawals since December that have not ever been deposited back into those banks. So people, you're right, maybe who in their right mind still has not done a withdrawal. I'm sure most people have, but if you're
I'm talking
trying to
5
only
years
take-
ago. I mean, this has been going
right.
on.
Right.
It's been going on
Well,
for
I
5
don't,
years.
I don't know how many options there are for, foreign banks in Greece. In the U.S., I'm sure you could find in my, commute through Manhattan, I could, go to HSBC or a number of other foreign banks and maybe put my money there. But I'm not sure if those options exist, in most of the far-flung places in Greece. So people may be stuck with what they've got, but they are trying to pull out now. It's just they're capped at that 60 euros still.
Yeah. At least this is going to be something to look forward to on Sunday to find out what's going on. Let's move along. I understand a couple of West African countries sent that were affected by the Ebola that they traveled to the UN to look for some funding help.
Yeah, they want $3.2 billion for long-term recovery. Actually, about double that, though today they only came asking for 3.2. Looks like they got it. The U.S. is going to put in about $250 million additional dollars. This is going to be infrastructure, long-term improvements to the health sectors in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. But I did do an interview with some folks at Oxfam today here in the studio. And they had done a review of the past pledging conferences that have taken place over the past decade or so, major ones for Lebanon reconstruction after the Israeli fighting there in 2006, the Haiti reconstruction, and then the Gaza reconstruction after last year's fighting. And they said that wealthy countries, half of the money that they pledged never actually came through. So again, that's really disturbing to hear, an indication that, again, if we're talking about 3.2 billion pledged today from developed nations, I guess we'll do the math and say they're going to only get half of that. Disturbing that these countries, which you'd think would be able to be, answerable to their promises, don't always come through. So who knows if this money will really ever make it there.
Yeah, interesting. Also, any news on the Iranian nuclear deal? What's going on?
Well, they extended again till Monday. It's seemingly endless cycle of extensions here and more and more deadlines. But the sort of dynamic to watch over the last few days, which has been quite interesting, is sort of developing sense that there is fracturing in the negotiating coalition here, that Russia and China are beginning to sort of say things which are angering the rest of the negotiators. I mean, that's no surprise from what I see here on an almost daily basis at the United Nations, but we have not heard very much about that angle as it pertains to the Iranian talks. It seems like it's sort of a united front against Iran here. But what we are hearing is that Russia and China want the UN arms embargo on Iran to now be lifted immediately upon signing any sort of nuclear deal with the country. It seems a little absurd to me because we have heard so much, including most recently from the State Department's state sponsors of terrorism report, the extent to which Iran, despite all these economic sanctions, has still managed to fund a very expensive campaign worldwide, really, to keep sort of mercenary and proxy armies paid for and fighting in a whole range of different theaters. So again, this notion that what they need most, as it was said today by the Russian foreign minister, is this arms embargo to be lifted, I think is a little absurd. And that could explain maybe some of these comments from the U.S. that they're saying, look, we're not just going to sit here forever and negotiate endlessly. If big things can't be agreed to, we're willing to walk away. This perhaps could be one of the reasons for that kind of doomsday language.
Yeah, well, something else to look forward to on Monday then. By Sunday, now my Monday full. And finally, it looks like there's been a volcano eruption there in Bali, that little chaos in paradise.
Exactly right. This is interesting, too. It is a volcano that is notorious for continuous eruptions. And so the fact that the wind patterns are locked in where they are, we've seen the closure of most of the airports across Bali. It's currently stranding thousands of tourists, which maybe for them and their vacation plans isn't so terrible because they'll get to stay in a pretty nice spot. But I have seen some crazy photos of just ash raining down all over airports and some of those beautiful beachside cabanas. So maybe it's really not ideal. Yeah. But again, this is seismologists are saying this could go on for a matter of weeks. So I'm not really sure what the best plan is here. But if you've got this an upcoming vacation to Bali on your schedule, apparently airlines are being pretty flexible in allowing you to rebook. So
There
that's
you go. Maybe you could go to the new world's best tourism destination for 2015, which is
Ethiopia. Your favorite? It's top on your list, right?
yeah. There are a lot of fat guys walking around Ethiopia.
Look, the case being made for this is that this is a safe country. It is surrounded, though, in three cardinal directions by civil strife and war. But that notwithstanding, it is supposed to be very beautiful. We'll give it that. They protect their natural heritage sites apparently very well, and they've got a very diverse economy. It's one of the top 5 fastest growing economies in the world, and unlike many African economies, it's very diverse. They've got industry, they've got a service sector. So there are some reasons why Ethiopia isn't the craziest pick, but the European Council on Tourism, which is the body responsible for handing out this distinction, does sort of have a habit of being a little bit contrarian. They picked Zimbabwe as the 2014 top tourism destination, and boy, Robert Mugabe is really not the kind of face on at the airport I want to see when I go anywhere on vacation. So take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, there's one travel agent I think should be, at least in my world, would be fired immediately. There you go.
Hey, I'm not going there anytime soon. Maybe for work, but not for vacation.
As long as Ellen's paying for it, I'm sure you'd go. Zach, I appreciate you taking time for us, man. I mean, Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Take care.
I don't know why I thought Zach, because those two guys flying all over the place. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Maybe it's just because it's Friday. Maybe that's it. Right back after this.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
When the Supreme Court ruled that states can no longer ban same-sex marriage, it set off a cacophony of howling hyperbole by the GOP's 14 presidential wannabes. "I will not acquiesce to an imperial court," blustered Mike Huckabee. "Resist and reject judicial tyranny," he bellowed. Huck even couched his cry for continued discrimination against gay people by likening it to Abe Lincoln's principled refusal to honor the court's 1857 ruling that African Americans could not be citizens. Sure, Mike, you're a modern-day Lincoln, except that he was opposing discrimination while you're demanding that government enforce it. Then came the wild hair of the GOP's presidential menagerie, Donnie Trump, blathering that the gay marriage decision is Jeb Bush's fault. Really? The Donald explained that Jeb's brother George had appointed Chief Justice John Roberts to the court, so there you have it. Shh, let's not spoil Trump's hallucination by telling him that Roberts actually voted against letting gays marry. Now, on to Scott Walker, who's touted as the serious contender. Yet, he's seriously pushing a constitutional amendment to let government keep prohibiting same-sex marriages. No one wants to live in a country where the government coerces people to act in opposition to their conscience, said Scott, apparently oblivious to the fact that state governments have long been coercing LGBT people to do exactly that. And now Walker is promising, if elected, to coerce them right back into a life of unconscionable injustice. This is Jim Hightower saying every one of the 14 Republican presidential candidates is marching backwards into the bigoted past, piously thumbing their noses not only at millions of gays and lesbians, but also at the ever-growing majority of Americans, especially young people, who support marriage equality.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
From New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. It's Independence Day in South Sudan as the world's youngest nation turns 4 years old. U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice, who attended independence ceremonies in South Sudan in 2011, recorded a video message to mark the anniversary.
I remember the hope and the unity of that day. The promise of a new beginning for you, who had suffered so much and persevered for so long. 4 years later, those happy memories are a horrifying reminder of all that has been lost.
More than 2 million South Sudanese have been displaced since civil war broke out in late 2013 between the army of President Salva Kiir and troops loyal to his former deputy, Riek Machar.
Only leaders on both sides can end this violence. Yet, President Kiir and Riek Machar would rather haggle over personal power and wealth than agree on solutions.
A week-long ceasefire has been announced in Yemen and will enter into effect late Friday. In a statement today, the UN said it had received assurances from Yemen's president in exile that a Saudi-led coalition supporting him would suspend all military activity during the ceasefire. And Iranian nuclear talks continue in Vienna as negotiators butt up against a deadline early Friday morning, after which point the U.S. Congress would have an extra 30 days to scrutinize any agreement. Secretary of State John Kerry said today that real progress is being made toward a deal, but that the U.S. won't keep talking if Iran isn't serious about bridging remaining differences.
If the tough decisions don't get made, we are absolutely prepared to call an end to this process.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Of course, if you missed any of the program today, thericksmithshow.com is where you're going to get the podcast. The app on the smartphone, highly suggest you pick that up, and you can always email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. This weekend, I hope you're planning some interesting stuff, maybe a little cooking out, some good stuff. I've got a suggestion. Tomorrow night, Saturday night, July the 11th there, 7:30 to 10:30, Cornerstone Coffee House there in Camp Hill over on Market Street. My friend Doug Morris is going to have his annual Woody Guthrie sing-along. He's going to come out, bring out his guitar, and people are going to bring instruments. It's really a fun time of, just going and singing the old labor songs and some of the old music. And I take my daughter. We're going to enjoy the evening as we have done in the past, and I hope you'll see you there. And you can come and say hello to me, and I won't think that you're attempting to intimidate or harass me. Just that simple. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.